The coffins stood in rows, placed on the priest, leaned against the walls and were silent. In the middle of the plank barracks, where boots trampled the earthen floor and there were no windows, the last work of the master froze in imperfections, like a ship on slipways, also a coffin. This is what is called a product. The unfinished coffin was much more solemn than the finished ones and looked more significant among all the others, placed in ordinary containers on the priest. Opening a view of the gloomy grey sky and ragged clouds, the gates of the shed were wide open, and one gate, which was completely falling to one side, was propped up by a pole, as if a legless man was using a crutch for an invalid. Immediately, at the very threshold, boards were piled up, which were once fences, pavements and ordinary wooden containers. Not a single clean one, all caked with mud, dried in clay, scuffed. So dirty, like pigs, and overgrown with bristles, large, visible even to the eye splinters, which are the snout of pigs. But it was clear that when a craftsman fished a board out of a pile, laid it on a workbench, walked over it with his soul with a simple planer, each was cleansed of sins, acquiring a delicate, almost flesh color, and became smooth, just like a human palm, also open to the eye in all unique natural lines. The workshop smelled, therefore, not of rot or decay. It smelled of life-giving tree resin, the spirit of the kingdom of heavenly pine and spruce, which exuded from freshly planed boards knocked together into coffins. The craftsman was looking for a suitable product, according to the measure, and, probably, according to the rank. He personally went to shoot the measurement, although Institutov, in his desire to start everything as soon as possible, gave the forced camp master an order of what rank the coffin needed, and dictated the exact medical growth of the deceased. It could have made you fat. It could have made you dry. It depends on what kind of person he was, good or bad. And with these words he did not heed the chief, proceeded broadly and dignifiedly, as if on stilts, to the army ambulance that drove into the zone, unarmed and exhausted by a long ride, not at all like the same alien trucks drove here, stuffed with living guards or animals, where the people, she did not wait for permission to enter, and swam behind the barbed wire easier than even death itself, without disturbing the local faded world in any way, let in by the guards without the slightest check. The coffin maker looked into the truck, stayed there for a minute, alone with the dead man, and, walking 10 steps back to the barn, dropped in earnest with a reproach that was understandable only to himself, his dried-up. Institutov stood with his hands down and looked after this difficult prisoner, realizing with amazement that now it depends not only on his work, but also on his opinion. "Darling, how long will it take you to complete this procedure?" "1 hour is enough for everything about everything." "Christ is with you, citizen chief." Work is easily argued when there are no sins in the soul. This is how God will have mercy, maybe an hour, or maybe all 5 for our sins. You know, I have no time to wait for favors from your God. I have nothing to do with your personal sins. Religion was invented for slaves, and this Jesus Christ could first learn to write and read if he undertook to teach morality to all mankind. Well, the product, close-fitting, galvanizing. Since you don't believe in God, put on a pack of tea, and I'll do it in the best possible way, as ordered. Well, we'll talk about your reward when the result is visible. This, of course, but you should add 1 more pack, citizen chief. And candy for tea? Then I will certainly send for you a coffin in an hour. Everything is in the stall, buy everything. This is us, excuse me, the last people. It will be easy for us to die, there is nothing. And give all the same a deposit for inspiration, otherwise thoughts will oppress. And candy for tea? Then I will certainly send for you a coffin in an hour. Everything is in the stall, buy everything. This is us, excuse me, the last people. It will be easy for us to die, there is nothing. And give all the same a deposit for inspiration, otherwise thoughts will oppress. And candy for tea? Then I will certainly send for you a coffin in an hour. Everything is in the stall, buy everything. This is us, excuse me, the last people. It will be easy for us to die, there is nothing. And give all the same a deposit for inspiration, otherwise thoughts will oppress. Institutov sent Pavlov to the stall. I waited for him to return. I only wanted to show 2 packs of tea and cookies in order to lure him into work as bait, but the artisan refused to rush without a deposit, and the chief medical officer gave up, unable to force at least someone to do everything the way he did all day. Wanted this. "What about us, eat air?" Pavlov barked. "No way. The institute's got scared, I'll feed everyone. I'll go to the dining room and immediately make an agreement about you." Pavlov was pleased, hidden from sight. "If only I could bring a piece of bread." Wait, it will bring it, since you are hungry yourself. He looked, grinning, at Alyoshka, who looked like a marauder, a shabby red overcoat, an unlined collar of a dead man's tunic, lacquered orchestra boots, the toes of which were pointed like ladies' shoes, and with a sing-song sadness he said, "Don't press yourself, heavenly infantry. Just think, dressed in a mortal, but alive." Alyosha hung around at the entrance to the barn until he was called into the warmth and the artisan spoke to him, moving his coffins. In the depths of the shed, it turned out, another old man was sitting alone on a stool, wearing glasses and without a beard, but otherwise like a wrinkled copy of the one that in the meantime was turning coffins alone. He had the same form of baldness on his head and was also dressed in a camp pea coat with a number plate on his chest, but even without that, his whole physiognomy showed himself to be precisely a prisoner. He kept a weighty resolute silence, as happens when everyone agrees on everything or everyone denies and with nothing do not agree. His lips were tightly closed, even compressed, as if to spit. The plastic glasses were as bulky as an aquarium, and the face of this mischievous old man looked like something wretchedly aquarium-like, two colorless fish eyes, sullen lips like a snail, shaved, watery cheeks. The forlorn dry figure curled up inquiringly, so that a large bald head fell on a frail chest. He sat with his legs folded under the stool in a schoolboy style, and he laid his elongated, dry hands on his knees. But when the bearded man finally chose a coffin that matched all the signs, hugged him like a child and carried him to the workbench, the prisoners quarreled over God, whom the coffin master intrusively mentioned, and the shed shuddered from the noise. Our houses, our burrows are full of fear. Oh, mothers, our mothers, why did you give birth to us? God forgive me, since we are all looking for somewhere to hide, we strive to go back to your little hole. And what is your opinion, Amadeus Domyanovich? A shame. Your will, Amadeus Domyanovich, I bow before your great mind, nobility of soul and pure conscience, but you, my dear, it's out of pride. You sit here on my stool in the corner and spit in all directions, wherever you look. I don't know what you're sad about. They ruined a lot of souls, so let's save at least our own. The weepy eyes of the puny old man gleamed piercingly, and his lips closed even harder and more disgustedly than before. At this time, the coffin master turned around, looking straight ahead, and buried himself in Alyosha. They found themselves so close to each other, as if measured in height, and there was a mighty old man only on the shoulder of Kolmogorov. His forehead, it turned out, cut right across the scar, as if poking a huge chisel. From his smallness and at the sight of this infantile tenderness of the scar in Kolmogorov's heart, everything in his soul was pinched by involuntary pity. The workman raised his eyes in surprise and was immediately amazed, delighted, opened up to meet him. Oh, what a hero, well, what a big one. Since it's so big, let's help. And then my assistant went on strike, but don't think, son, like him, on our planet there is only one mind, well, maybe two. They dragged a thin body to me from the barrack behind the coffin. Medicine after all this death witnessed. I began to lay, and he came to life. Well, he looked like a saint, with condemnation, wrinkled his lips and spat right in my eyes. I don't know what force pulled, but such a case fell out, a miracle went on a miracle, the guards got tired and moved away. So I quickly put the bricks into the coffin, nailed the lid, and I also buried Amadeus Domyanovich in my coffin and nursed him from the other world until he left. All the time he did not talk to me, he just looked at me like that and threatened with a look. I exhausted my whole soul, I confessed to him in all my baseness. Then, however, he found the gift of speech. And what a fastidious, he ate from a spoon and only warm, served him a warm herring, such an organism. He inspired me when he went out, through your death, consider that you have found eternal life, lie in my coffin, breathe and rejoice. But he didn't, proud. He sat over there on a stool in the corner and protested, so they noticed us in the duty unit and added a term until death. They considered that all this was, although not an escape, but preparation for an escape. Yes, I'm glad, I hit the nail on the head with Amadeus Domyanovich. Without his opinion, who am I in the world? Yes, look like a lid without a deck. And that I am his half-dear, that's for sure. Without me, as it is, he will rot in the ground for a long time, and with me he is risen straight from the dead. Without his opinion, who am I in the world? Yes, look like a lid without a deck. And that I am his half-dear, that's for sure. Without me, as it is, he will rot in the ground for a long time, and with me he is risen straight from the dead. Without his opinion, who am I in the world? Yes, look like a lid without a deck. And that I am his half-dear, that's for sure. Without me, as it is, he will rot in the ground for a long time, and with me he is risen straight from the dead. For some reason it seemed to Kolmogorov that all this had once happened in his life, both this broad-browed kind old man and exactly the same story about a man who was dead and then suddenly came to life. The coffin master called him to help, hold our boat, son, and I'll walk with a hammer, stuff. Hold on tight and turn where I say. The covers of those products that stood along the walls were removed, like coats or jackets, and each was thrown with a hollow side over its coffin shoulder. Alyosha began to understand that he was helping the artisan and again lit up. Tomorrow, grandfather, I will take the train and go home. I won back. What kind of war is this, son? On the one that shot at me from machine guns, from a sniper rifle, from a grenade launcher. Well, God is with you, fight yourself further. Well, let's turn to the side. Phew. Well, they gave such matter. You don't tighten, but you darn. In front of our eyes, what was planed and knocked together from stray boards was muffledly dressed in red lace. The bottom of the workshop was gently laid out with shavings, scooping it right under the workbench. He tore a white linen in two, probably a discarded sheet, fiddled around, tapped with a hammer, and Alyosha saw at the bottom of the coffin a kind of featherbed with a raised head. But as soon as the last nail was driven in and the folds were straightened out where they remained, the product itself became dead and all the goodness arranged by human hands changed its appearance. The quilting of shavings at the bottom turned into something stone. The beautiful evenness of the upholstery began to torment the eye. The foreman went out and a few minutes later brought in on a cart an oblong box made of some kind of dull metal, resembling a large trough. They put an empty coffin into this box as if into a pit. Amadeus Domyanovich, build a fire, get some coals, while we lay down a new one. Well, what are you going to do? Keep silent, boycott. Okay, I'll scout myself, but you, my dear, need to call someone from the guard. Tell me, Pankratij Afanasovich is calling, let them go and search what we put in the product. I would have dived into it myself, God forgive me. And call your boss, where is he, the customer? A pack of tea is still with him. Pavlov went for the chief medical officer. But it was all the same to him who to listen to, where to go and what to do. Thrusting his hands deeper into the pockets of his pea coat, as if he were cold, he seemed to routinely go into greyness and gloom, like a sailor pacing on the deck. The camp zone, hungry for life, bristling with iron rows of barbed wires, cut only by narrow paths of gravel, poured so deep that boots, stepping, were screwed in with a crunch, like screws, did not frighten or even excite the nerves, which suddenly became just as deaf. He turned around quickly and returned, strikingly changed in mood. Greedily, with rapture, he bit into a large strong green apple. At the same time, he grimaced and clattered his teeth. It was evidently so sour that it even cramped his cheekbones. But he endured and chewed, experiencing delight from this. I put my hand in a pea coat, and there is an apple. Well, how it fell from the sky into your pocket. After all, I haven't seen apples point blank for 3 years. Do you believe? Well, I swear on bread. He muttered loudly with his full mouth, and he, as if deaf on. Bite, profitable. Yes, good luck. Bite, unstolen. And imperiously held out to Alyosha a juicy, fresh stub. Kolmogorov smiled so as not to offend, but instead of a mouth, dodging, he turned his cheek, so that the stub slid over his face, leaving a damp and for some reason foamy pink trail. Pavlov blooded his mouth. Maybe he bit his lip, maybe his gums began to bleed. He laughed condescendingly at himself when he realized that he had been hurt by some kind of apple, and at the same moment, with one elusive movement, he pulled out a kind of knife from behind the top of his boot, a flattened and sharpened iron pin, the size of a pencil. He muttered loudly with his full mouth, and he, as if deaf on. Bite, profitable. Yes, good luck. Bite, unstolen. And imperiously held out to Alyosha a juicy, fresh stub. Kolmogorov smiled so as not to offend, but instead of a mouth, dodging, he turned his cheek, so that the stub slid over his face, leaving a damp and for some reason foamy pink trail. Pavlov blooded his mouth. Maybe he bit his lip, maybe his gums began to bleed. He laughed condescendingly at himself when he realized that he had been hurt by some kind of apple, and at the same moment, with one elusive movement, he pulled out a kind of knife from behind the top of his boot, a flattened and sharpened iron pin, the size of a pencil. He muttered loudly with his full mouth, and he, as if deaf on. Bite, profitable. Yes, good luck. Bite, unstolen. and imperiously held out to Alyosha a juicy, fresh stub. Kolmogorov smiled so as not to offend, but instead of a mouth, dodging, he turned his cheek, so that the stub slid over his face, leaving a damp and for some reason foamy pink trail. Pal Palich blooded his mouth. Maybe he bit his lip, maybe his gums began to bleed. He laughed condescendingly at himself when he realized that he had been hurt by some kind of apple, and at the same moment, with one elusive movement, he pulled out a kind of knife from behind the top of his boot, a flattened and sharpened iron pin, the size of a pencil. But instead of a mouth, dodging, he turned his cheek, so that the stub slid over his face, leaving a damp and for some reason foamy pink trail. Pal Palich blooded his mouth. Maybe he bit his lip, maybe his gums began to bleed. He laughed condescendingly at himself when he realized that he had been hurt by some kind of apple, and at the same moment, with one elusive movement, he pulled out a kind of knife from behind the top of his boot, a flattened and sharpened iron pin, the size of a pencil. But instead of a mouth, dodging, he turned his cheek, so that the stub slid over his face, leaving a damp and for some reason foamy pink trail. Pal Palich blooded his mouth. Maybe he bit his lip, maybe his gums began to bleed. He laughed condescendingly at himself when he realized that he had been hurt by some kind of apple, and at the same moment, with one elusive movement, he pulled out a kind of knife from behind the top of his boot, a flattened and sharpened iron pin, the size of a pencil. Outside the threshold of the shed, a hot fire, lit in a tin trough, was already puffing, smoking into the wind. Pal Palich squatted a little further away and warmed himself by the fire, cutting off almost transparent shreds from an apple core and sending them into his mouth with bliss. In the trough, where neat chocks were charred, pricked with great zeal, 2 homemade weighty soldering irons were heated up, iron rods with a cast iron welded on the end. One such, not yet heated, coffin master stirred the boiling fire, sipping his knowingly reddened nose. He thought, however, not so much about the fire, but about the drink being prepared on it in between times. A smoked canning tin, like a monkey, hung over the fire and held on to the rim of the trough with the tail of the bent lid and resinous kypher melted in it. It began to smoke, warming and appeasing the lively touching eyes of the artisan. There is nothing worse when they are recognized as unfit, when, like material, you disappear. It fit the carpenter, it fit the herbalist, here it is yours and life on earth lasts. He lulled the fire. I'm a rotten board, sometimes I'll take it, and I'll think about myself. No, I don't think, don't be afraid, I won't leave you uselessly, no matter how rotten you are, even if I make chips and chiffona. Your smoke is delicious, Pal Palich spoke to the artisan, wiping his lips sour either from blood or from an eaten apple with the sleeve of his pea jacket, stretching out his grey, hardened hands to the fire. The sadness in his voice was clear and rustic, like glass. Delicious, so eat up. Let's skip a sip for peace, we'll still have time. No, I'm on a diet. My discipline was lame, so I pulled it up, now I drink only compotes from dried fruits. What did you say about boards? Rottenness, perhaps, also benefits, if it is with a soul. Well, where is this benefit? Who is here with a soul? And these people, like chips, will be allowed to extract benefit from themselves. You're lying. Whatever the person, whatever the soul, a splinter. You won't forgive your offense, but you will forgive, they won't forgive you, such is life. The path. You can't leave, but every day you can disappear anywhere. I would like an abyss. So that everything around becomes new. Are we plowing the land? Or forging iron? Yes, I can do this and that, it makes no difference to me, even to a factory, even to a collective farm, drivers are needed everywhere, and I am a top-class driver. I love the road. So I lied, I can't want this. Work is a wolf. Around the same. And roll on all 4 sides. Then he said quietly, as if complaining, they all do not like me. Who are you talking about? About people who are many when you stand in front of them alone like a finger. People are strength. These people will do whatever they want to you. Why don't people love you? The coffin master was surprised. Because I don't like them myself, but I don't know how to pretend, I don't want to apologize. They won't let them live for this, people, was the answer. But I don't love myself, I'm disgusted every day by my own stink. And I will never love this. And it's disgusting to be afraid. I always do what I'm afraid of. Out of principle, guards approached 2 unarmed soldiers sent by the head of the guard instead of himself. The big tall Asiatic, not realizing that he himself was not the boss for anyone except for his little shabby brother, who kept respectfully at a distance from him in order to be in time and to serve, and to dodge a slap in the face, looked around with an important look around the place around him. Who are you? He instantly chose Alyoshka for one understandable punishment. Pshel. I didn't understand, huh? Pal Palich convulsively grinned. What are you, bastard, walleye? Do you not recognize your own? Yes, what is happening to you? Shouted the artisan. He decided to show off, and the authorities rolled over. How could he not be proud? But is it the master of life who turned up? Looker. He, in his village from childhood, probably did not eat his fill and only rejoiced at the clear sky. Well, and walks like a goggle. And God bless him, because he doesn't do evil to us at all. Well, let's keep quiet. Well, let's move forward. Well, let's give way to him. What kind of evil is this? After all, you'll let a child go ahead, and you won't be offended if you stamp your foot. So take pity on him like a child, since you are stronger. And if it's weaker, well, at least like me, so respect, and noble. Pal Palich endured and became judicious and strict. No one will touch Alika in my presence, only he can speak to me here, he said with the same force, as if he had ordered life itself. The Asian guard, already frightened, began to give submissive signs. He extended his hands towards him like a brother and muttered something exciting. The artisan, changing the hysterical breath of the conversation, turning to business, again mentioned the missing chief medical officer. The languor over the bubbling odorous tea resin, which promised him warmth, and relaxation, and gratuitous joy, was replaced by the fear of freezing in place. He came into a fussy ant movement, forcing the guards to take their places at the Zinkolo, and Alyoshka and Pal Palich to go after the body. The woolen blanket, which hid the unsightly load all the way, was pulled back and crumpled, stuffed into a corner that smelled of gasoline, away from the eyes. They hauled out the stretcher and found themselves instantly in the barn with it, running as if in the rain, finding shelter with ease and chilly impatience. It was liberatingly easy to do everything. The burden did not pull hands and did not oppress with its appearance, and Alyosha, embracing the body from the other end by the legs, felt this unexpected smoothness, lightness. After that, they all stopped, realizing that some last and important minute had come for this alien dead body. What a skinny one, everything sagged as it is, the artisan sighed. Pal Palich was mournfully silent. It's just too big, but it's new and only worn twice, said Kolmogorov, suddenly feeling guilty. The craftsman did not understand. How to eat dried up. This means that he was a good person. Good, they dry and, even if they are dead, they do not have a stench, they smell of straw. He stammered, looking at the patch from the plaster, realizing that covered up nothing more than a death mark in the forehead. Suffered. God bless his soul. Here he is, killer whale. Why is it so himself? He lost his faith with hope. Or maybe he is not a bullet in his own forehead, maybe someone helped him, a senior in rank. Yes, if only your God. Or was he still against it, aiming at the sky, but hit on the forehead? I still smell the stench. Oh, what a stench. Oh, what is there? I don't, I know for sure. I know that, it turns out, what your God does not know or pretends to do. I know, and, too, I am silent in a rag. Because to each his own. Because every man for himself. Because it's necessary. But I am not God. Do you know who he is? Who fired that and God, because it was he who put an end to life, said Pal Palich. Where is your boss, this hurried man? He made an order for an hour, but he himself caught a trace. The coffin master began to fuss. He will come running to the ready, he has a flare, hence the boss. Is it with God then? But how could it be without him? You smell the bosses, just like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Why didn't you get out yourself? Are you afraid? Well, come on, Mukin, in this life you lost, Frerok. Here is the surname. It means that in his family, in the killer whale, they flew around the world like a fly or buzzed incessantly. With God, we all fly around the world like flies, and where the death slams, there is paradise. It definitely slammed. Got caught by the arm, Pal Palich blurted out stubbornly. Now we'll pack it in your box, and everything will be covered, and where the death slams, there is paradise. It definitely slammed. Got caught by the arm, Pal Palich blurted out stubbornly. Now we'll pack it in your box, and everything will be covered, and where the death slams, there is paradise. It definitely slammed. Got caught by the arm, Pal Palich blurted out stubbornly. Now we'll pack it in your box and everything will be covered. The old man hugged the lid of the coffin and covered it with the dead man dressed in full uniform, hiding him in the dark. When the lid fell on the coffin, Pal Palich involuntarily grinned. On the side of it, like a stamp, on the kumak of the covering, a yellow hammer and sickle were visible. Survived, old man. The coffin is under the fence, this is understandable, but what a bright future went to the rapper. Do not you know? The artisan shot up in the hearts, all the factory material that was stolen for joy, and 2 whole boxes were dragged from the club of red flags. There is no color, they crawl like a louse, because for how many years they hung out at every holiday. Well, I didn't see it, and so I cut it out of rags. Well, it got out. Oh, it's like embarrassment, just cry at least. Hurry up, Pal Palich said. The citizen chief trembles all the way, he doesn't know where to hide himself, he tries to fulfill the order. Toils, tooth puller. The chief medical officer showed up when the zinc box was already half sealed. Institutov ran into the shed, searching with his eyes for what might have seemed a forgotten cap. His hands were busy, in each institute he held an unsightly bloated boiled sausage. You can eat, boys, said the chief med in a trembling voice, but without a shadow of a doubt on a very serious face prepared in advance. Alyosha, head-to-head with the old man, was crushing the edge of a clean zinc sheet with a wooden chock, from which a sigh of smoke exhausted by the soldering iron flooded out every moment. Pal Palich was also busy with the artisan, he stood ready to carry in place of the exhausted soldering iron heated in coals. Words about food therefore ugly turned sour in the air, as did the boiled sausages themselves in the hands of the boss. Only 2 guards doing nothing, who were probably also hungry at the end of the day, shifted their gaze to what was holding Institutov on weight more and more impatiently, and, unable to bear the burden, he carefully placed the sausages on a clean free corner of a workbench frozen with an unfinished coffin. In the barn, only the noise of work remained audible. Institutov strolled along the finished products, knowingly examining the voids gaping in them without much meaning. Of course, the frail, useless old man sitting on a stool in the corner of the shed, full of silence, did not hide from his gaze. The chief medical officer could not think that he was sitting silent without much sense, and therefore he did not fail to speak magnanimously to him. And you, dear, why don't you work together with everyone? The one who was called Amadeus Domyanovich immediately announced from the corner, disgusting. Institutov's face changed. So how is it, my dear, may I ask? Shame, echoed calmly in the corner. Well, this is already too much, comrade, what do you allow yourself? In response, irrevocably loudly sounded, little one. The chief medical officer called hysterically, guards, shut up this prisoner. This is my employee, we are a couple. I do it, and he looks after the quality. It's always easier with someone. Go get some air, citizen boss, the master of the coffin wished sympathetically. Institutov, unnaturally prudent, like a circus horse on a bow, butted his head several times into the void and leaned backwards into the yard, but suddenly jumped up and screamed, as if dying, pointing his finger at the floor in front of him, where shavings moved, under which something living was hiding. Solder. Solder. Well, someone solder them. Everyone froze, chained by this cry. But they did not find anything terrible or at least new around. Paler than a dead man, the chief med was weakly gobbling and, like a fish, was silently swallowing air with a greedy mouth. He is scared to death of mice, Pal Palich grinned. The work was ready. The chief medical officer was hiding in the car and did not want to get out into any, to take his own order from the artisan. Pal Palich drove the ambulance to the threshold of the barn. One of his dissatisfied glances was enough to attract the help of the guards who were hanging around idle. Before everyone took on the mortal burden, the workman established silence with his personal silence and turned ingratiatingly to Pal Palich, say something in parting. The soul asks, tell me. And why talk, old man? Let's go. Oh, you eternal hastess. Amadeus Domyanovich. Say at least you, ennoble this death woman with your great mind. A shame, for some reason the offended old man croaked. And then the coffin master himself said quietly, frustratedly, farewell, huge country, unfortunate person. Long farewell. At the Karaganda sorting station, behind a blank wall of railway warehouses, a funeral team was waiting for their fate, an elderly, simple-minded ensign and a young, quiet soldier. The meeting place was flooded with twilight long ago. It was cold and hungry, as if in captivity. Behind the collar, like lice, biting fear swarm. The feeling of the unknown akin to strange men of different ages, and from a distance, and even in the dark, it might seem that they were sniffing two stray dogs of some kind of ugly breed, human growth, tailless, in grey long-haired skins, with knapsacks of humps behind their backs. The young one was still serving someone. Readily froze and waited at attention. Or, in the absence of another owner, he tried to be so useful to the eldest in their company, whom he listened to, obedient like a son, when he was troublesomely scouring within 2-3 steps, squirming around. Ivan Petrovich, what is Moscow like? Moscow has everything, that's what it is like. Have you ever seen bananas? That's where it is, but in Moscow they are. Just think, they grow on trees. I don't understand how people live in it, because everything is already there, there's nothing to do directly, just know your salary and go shopping. Ivan Petrovich, will we be in Moscow for a long time? How much we can endure, we have not enough limits in all respects. At a funeral, this is a day or two, they bury painfully quickly. We will also stay with relatives, we were so lucky that we agreed with one of them on this score. Well, if they start feeding, I don't know. If we stretch out the money and provisions, we'll live for a week. Let's take air into the lungs, pretend that there was a shortage of return tickets. They will warm up, of course, for every extra day, be ready. Ivan Petrovich, what am I going to do in Moscow? Your business is small, where I am, there you are. And my business is small, we will not do anything except the team. But with your mind, stay yours, hurry up and take your time, otherwise they will say later. They will always find something to say, you will become extreme, and your whole life has fallen under the wheels. In the middle you need to go, it is like Christ in the bosom. They are fools, let them do what they want, and we will do what they say. A bright, misty recess in the sky could be seen the mouth of the moon, hungrily open in the direction of several small stars that dangled with bait, it seemed, pinned on the stings of fishhooks. But suddenly something uterine seemed to be in the whole night, as if swallowed. Only the buildings with empty black windows, which were abandoned by this late hour, were left with rounded uninhabited islands of light, each of which stuck out a lamppost with a single white-hot nut at the very top like a bare high-rise palm tree. The surroundings, swallowed by darkness, were continually filled with animal sounds, African roars and groans, as if wild hungry animals were wandering around, that they were glad to swallow someone themselves now. This was made terribly audible by the nightshore of the freight station, its multi-tonnage womb, digesting in itself everything which was constantly set in motion by the inhuman force of mechanisms at the behest of the people who controlled this force. There was no train station or station square close by, only the prison walls of storage cells, locked deserted warehouses, the concrete carcasses of electric locomotive traction depots, smelling of combustible sweat solariums. A restless couple was highlighted in the darkness by high-beam headlights. The uncle and the boy shamefully froze against the wall, as if they had been robbed and undressed, and their two headless shadows reared up and shied like cats into the darkness. From the ambulance, like from a cuckoo clock, a man shook himself out, they recognized him as the head of the medical unit. He screamed out loud, "Comrades, time is running out. We will show the way. Follow me." And flooded away. The car started off over the bumps of the rocky wasteland. The vagrant servants trotted after her until they had to run with all their might. At the entrance to the concrete ramp, not a steep, but dotted with potholes hill, the tired ambulance rattletrap hesitated and the obedient peasants running after it slipped ahead at a fast pace. All hidden by a tin lingering canopy, from where the lock's eyes of gloomy identical warehouse hangars looked, as if from under their brows, the platform of the marshalling yard seemed distant and impenetrable. At the beginning of the platform, a chain of convicts was being loaded from wooden flour-grinding wagons, in complete silence, about a dozen silent loaders carried out and carried on their shoulders coughing sacks of dust. Loaded with sacks, they also silently parted, letting an extraneous procession into the vacated passage, and patiently waited, watching how two panting servicemen ran from a strict coffin-like car, similar to a police one, and the punitive brownish-green color of the mancart rode a few meters from them. They catch deserters, the peasants sighed and set to work with a clear conscience. The ensign ran ahead of the ambulance, chasing the soldier. The procession missed the next wagon loaded at the platform. The boy, followed by the uncle, ran so recklessly, afraid to get under the wheels, that as soon as the car slowed down at the desired warehouse, they promptly disappeared. For a long time, the uncle heard shouts to that behind his back, but he ran away from them, thinking that they were being driven somewhere further, and this chief medical officer yelled in vain after the fleeing funeral team, "Stop! Stop!" The runners disappeared into the darkness, from which only the surprised echo of his own screams returned to Institutov. A train of 2 cars, mail and luggage, was already at the platform. The carriages seemed to be dozing. The shunter, who pulled them out for loading and breathed in the heat of his labors, sprinkled combustible sweat, left for another job, but had to return. "After all, this is unthinkable," the chief medical officer groaned, weakly clapping his feet on the booming platform like a clap. "Run after them. Bring them back. Forward, forward." The chief medical officer listened to Kolmogorov and went further along the platform. He disappeared so quickly that Institutov shuddered fearfully, feeling himself surrounded by omnipotent darkness. "Go you. Now, follow him." He shoved into the darkness faster than Pal Palich, and when the black thickness swallowed up the last person he could still command, he was left completely alone. "I want to see my son," the one who had left all the institutes immediately heard behind him. He turned around in horror. The darkness spewed out a small gloomy figure, with a briefcase and a hat, as men abandoned by their mothers sometimes officially declare to their children. "What do you want here? Is this surveillance? Provocation? I'll call the police." Squeaked the chief med. "My son cannot speak, but Gennady has me, his father. I came to this city for the truth. I am a nuclear engineer, builder of the Abninsk nuclear power plant. I have 45 years of work experience. I participated in liquidation, Chernobyl accident, ha ha." Institutov convulsively amused, just to shut up the little man's mouth as soon as possible. "Well, of course, we now have a homeless person, then a liquidator of something like that. And you, too, suffered in the name of humanity. Putting out a nuclear fire. I irradiated, I look thoroughly, the cloak and shirt had radiation sickness. Well, here's the thing. You're ugly drunk. No, you are sick, my dear, mental. Stop blackmailing and get out of here, or I'll send you to a psychiatric hospital." The voice of the little man in the hat trembled, but did not give up. "Call the policeman. I demand to see the body of my son." Institutov backed away, but grinned arrogantly. "This is nonsense. This is pure schizophrenia based on radiation, alcohol and your great father's grief, of course. I was ready to help you as a father." He offered to arrange a hotel, provide a free return ticket. "In the end, I mourned with you when you went to my office for 2 days in a row and angrily interfered with the performance of your official duties, but such. Tell me, for mercy, who and how were they hiding from you?" As soon as it happened, this mournful news was immediately telegraphed. "Here and now, I do not have the right to give you even a death certificate, but the cargo will arrive in this Moscow of yours. You will receive everything from our escorts, do not hesitate." "Is the body hidden from you?" "Yes, how do we hide it, if we send it ourselves in the best possible way for the funeral? We don't have saints and refrigeration units for each corpse, even more so. A dead body in the medical sense is a perishable product. He is to go to the place of burial, and he must observe, elementary hygiene, and the zinc component of the coffin is, not a passage yard." "What other claims?" "Give you the guilty ones. You just can't do it without cheap hype. Do you want some action-packed detective? And you want the main role?" "I want to know the truth about the death of my son," the uninvited father answered muffledly. "Just let's not have crocodile tears, these are my ideas about objectivity. Do you want to know the truth? Did you think well? Do you really want this? Well, since you are suffering so morally, I will disturb the order. My dear, your son was killed by himself. Where else to dig? There is nowhere to go deeper if you want to get to the bottom of the truth. Yes, well, what are your eyes widening? That's it, really." Silence fell. Institutov humbly waited for him to start consoling his father, who had finally been crushed by grief. But he crawled out from under the ruins and whined, unable to endure any more pain. Gennady should have lived. Well, you would have told him that when he criminally took possession of the weapon of the head of the guard, and it is still unknown what was in his plans, to die or to kill. The chief medical officer wanted to stab this insensitive, malicious person with words. "An engineer and even a nuclear scientist, but you argue like a holy fool. You reason differently, think more broadly, like a man of science. Do you need facts? Food for brain. Your son died of his own free will. The fact that we didn't make a fuss out of this proves your right to financial assistance and sympathy. But for your son, such a funeral is arranged, they also give you the right to a pension, and you insult. Yes, deceivers entered that he died in the line of duty, not out of pity for you, of course, but in order not to tarnish your well, that's it. And for some reason we don't draw up other facts, everyone wanted to be on good terms with you, without detectives. If you want to find the guilty ones, then don't make a mistake, citizen, otherwise you'll find out that you don't owe you anything and that your son is the dregs of society. It will make you feel better, won't it? I am an atomic engineer, I know. Is it very hygienic to open the coffin of your own son? Soul out and gutted to the bitter end, gutted. Yes, open up. Install. Gut. And then live with your truth until you rot alive, suffer. Give permission from the SES for this vile unhygienic procedure or free the site for work. Get out of here, you drunken nasty fool. Don't disgrace your son, don't dirty your biography at the end, at least where is there? Well, give birth, or something, before it's too late for another, brand new. Love him, tender and holy, name him Gina, you will build another nuclear power plant somewhere, maybe he will carry it. But here and now it didn't carry over, so this is how the horoscope turned out. Don't you understand yet? Not understood. You were born on the wrong day, so why are you whining? What culprits are you looking for? You yourself, are to blame for everything, you drunken beast. It's to blame that he was born, that he lived. It's you yourself ruined your son on the day when you gave birth to him into the world and prepared one of your own whining. Police. There was a heart-rending cry in the darkness. The little man in the hat backed off somewhere blindly, bumped into the wall of the hangar and slid down it, murderously, almost to the ground. Emily Tyen. Suddenly in a sing-song voice also called the head of the medical unit. Where are the police who protect you? She, my dear, is not. The small figure pressed against the wall and sagged, as if suspended from it by a pretzel. Father Mukin, get up, stop squatting. Disdainfully said the chief medical officer, as they say, finita la comedy. It is you and your drinking companions who fall into such a hysteria. Drunkenness does not decorate a man. You need to drink less. Don't drink if you don't know how. Does your wife, Mother Mukina, actually know about the death of her son? I don't understand something. I didn't go with you, but you are, by all appearances, a heavy drinker. Is she also a drinker? And then look for you there under the fence, but know that no one will look for you. We will bury, if anything, even without you. Institutov has not allowed himself such bliss for a long time. He said everything only to bring suffering to the little man in the most unbearable form. Not even to make him suffer more and more, but to destroy him with this pain, extracted from his own soul and brains, like electric shocks. I won't anesthetize them at all anymore, flashed through the mind of the toothbrusher. The carriages stood still, the warehouse was silent, the subordinates strayed. In this devastation, the head of the medical unit knocked decisively on the warehouse gate several times in a row, shouted at the baggage car and announced already into the amorphous thickness of darkness, how long can I wait? You can't work like that. You must be conscious, comrades, after all, you are the working class. In response, an unwashed head popped out of the vestibule of the baggage car. And here you are wound up, you bastard Democrat. Come on, shout louder, hold a rally. No sooner had the wagon been served, you immediately became ill. Unbearable, dissatisfied with everything, had a separate conscience. And what a beauty it was, wow, a pleasure to live and travel. Why did you destroy beauty, viper? I feel sick in your company. Go poke yourself. Knackos, kiss my ass, shouted Institutov. Shut up. Attention. No, you will work. You will learn from me what work is. You will carve a mountain in stone, pile up a mountain, bastards, from your own shit. The employee of the baggage car was scolded. He busily leaned out of the vestibule onto the platform with his whole body and briskly voiced like a woman, well, why are you, master, but who is across you? At least someone has a finger on you. Oh, viper. Oh, Lord. Well, there was no way, no life at all. I'm going. From a distance, a heart-rending iron screech, the open shutters of the car, as if they were tearing the living to pieces. The owner of the carriageman shouted. Voices floated up. Loaders poured in. A fat storekeeper floundered among them. Locks clattered, greed breathed from the hangar. Wow. They boiled hotly, hard workers, conversations, boiling up right there on petty passions. When the luggage was being loaded, the mailman was still staring blankly at the platform with his little blind windows in the gratings of the gratings. People dressed at home in tracksuits came out into the air. They were courier officers, and, similar in monotony to soldiers, began to importantly and boringly walk around in a couple near their car, guarding some secret. Suddenly, all the missing people poured out of the darkness onto the platform, and the workers sympathetically stared at a handful of exhausted people in army uniforms that ran before their eyes not for the first time. Institutov gasped, as if he himself had been running somewhere for a long time. After that, he again felt bliss when he stood in the pose of a warden and did not even drive anyone. And 4 little people dragged the domino into a raskariachka to weigh, then arrange, then pack, turning the zinc sarcophagus into an ordinary container. "Hello, Albert Genadevich," exclaimed the ingenious ensign. And he was glad that he drew attention to himself, but immediately fell silent, not knowing what else to say. Towards the uncle, coming to life, stepped from the side, it seemed, a still invisible person. "Father Mukin, stand in your place." The order came immediately. And the little man in the hat stepped back desolately. I obeyed. The uncle was embarrassed and obviously did not expect that he would get into a mess. Institutov overtook him and hissed, already looking eye to eye, "How do you understand all this, my dear?" "Comrade Chief Medical Officer, honestly, I myself don't know how to understand all this," the uncle hastily confessed. "I think so. I probably met Albert Genadevich this morning. What is incomprehensible in this should be understood." "Yes, what right did you have to meet? How did he even get here?" "So it was you, my dear, who set it up?" Wound up Institutov. "Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I myself don't know how I ended up. Well, here's a cross for you. We met right this morning when Albert Genadevich, if he is guilty, then I apologize, was standing, but I was just passing by with a private. No one could tell him when and where the shipment of the 200th would be, so he came straight up to me and asked. That's probably how he ended up here. And that he is the father, I later found out. If I had known right away, would I have uttered even a word? What am I, the rules, or something, I don't know. Not for the first time, shut up. Shut up, got it. Remember one thing, only one thing, from this moment you keep your mouth shut, you are silent like a fish. Do not come close to Moscow to him. If you yourself become attached on the train, do not answer questions. Shut up, that's your main task. The uncle breathed a sigh of relief, hearing from the lips of the chief medical officer himself what he must do in order not to be guilty of anything. All. I am silent, comrade chief medical officer. Well, just like a fish, you have no doubts, he said with zeal, shook his head several times with conviction, as if he would give himself a vow to be silent and only be silent, and he almost fell silent, but he caught himself and quickly, busily, as if in reserve, began chattering, looking over Institutov's shoulder to another person, Albert Genadevich, you know, when I heard mine, well, right by the throat, bitch, I took it. Buy, he says, in Moscow a color TV, that's all. Will you be able to get it in your store? I'd rather have a TV though, not a carpet. Carpet, God bless him, TV is better. That's how we talked, right? Television. Color. Oh, thank you so much. It's not me, it's my wife. I wanted a carpet, something. And he gave his wife, by God, this TV, and money is not a pity. He says that you can walk around the hut in slippers, we can bear it, but color TVs are now sold only in Moscow. Oh, well, I'm sorry you have such grief. Oh, you lost your son, condolences. Oh, comrade chief medical officer. Oh, well, everything, I'm silent. The uncle calmed down and all at once somehow went limp, like a herring, from which they removed the skeleton. Father Mukin, and you, I see, have succeeded. The chief medical officer looked around with mortal boredom in his eyes. Also Chichikov for me. Promise, or something, vulgar, well, or jiguli. Act with capital scale. The coffin box, not the largest in comparison with other packages that languished in wardrobes, sofas and other large-sized human belongings, was dragged into the container of the baggage car and forced into the last wall. All the mourners, including the chief medical officer himself, stood like idols at the locked carriage. The courier has long disappeared. The warehouse closed. Several loader men were still standing on the sidelines, shirking from work. They were called from somewhere in the darkness, they did not go. Smoked. It seemed that they were aiming cigarettes, killing time, and they, like guns after shots, emitted mists that smelled rancid almost like a powder stench. Meanwhile, one of them mocked the other, attracting attention. Couldn't it be quieter? Observe public order. Threw in their side institutes. He loves his wife. One responded with a laugh, already pointing at the other, who dutifully endured his grins. Then tell me, why do you love her? What is the meaning of this love of yours for your wife? Yes, I didn't buy love in the market, honestly, why is that? I love because I am a good person, because we have been together all my life, the one who was interrogated was pushing. And tomorrow she will die, and that's it. Realism. So why did you love her? And the kids? We gave birth, we have two, we will grow up. Well, let us die, but they will remain after us. Do you read what the press says? Have you seen such headlines? The son stabbed his father. Children dismembered their parents right in the bathroom. Well, how do you like it? Get away from the man. That he set up the same thing, but you don't want it for the price, smart guy. He believes, loves, and you pick at his soul, if only to pick and break everything in it, an indignant voice rang out. Why do you need to spoil everything in the world with your own words? What is the use that you deprive of faith in love? And I will answer this to all of you. You build, of course, with faith in love or at least in the hell of a bald man, but build something normal, of high quality that will stand without crutches. No, everything around is collapsing and collapsing, because it kept on snot and saliva. Of course, I can take pity. I can shut my mouth and brute force, of course, but if someone's love for his wife does not withstand my freedom of speech, such a marriage union is doomed. This is an axiom. Fights, alcoholism, poverty, that's all love. Questions asked out of unwillingness to know anything, indeed, left all the blessed ones in the cold, so that, having sowed despondency and shame among their own kind, the smart worker boasted with an imposing grin among some fools, marry, be fruitful. First, you will work for wives and children, then to the hospital and into the coffin. Wives have their own hard-earned begs for a mug of beer. Hunchback for children for 20 years and then they will go to the registry office and file it. They will also be ashamed to invite you to the wedding, such. Every day you have the same thing, chewing pasta, dragging a hernia and whining about life that it has given you little. Personally, I will arrange a holiday for my life. I'm not going to give away my life. Everything is just for yourself. Barber as much as you want, a suit, a restaurant, and for old age, I'll work here with you, I'll put off the same amount more. And if anything pink comes into the world, let him say thank you. Everyone trampled on their cigarettes and wearily went somewhere to work. He walked in the same direction, pleased with himself. The platform is empty. The air was seized with a spasm of expectation, as at the last moment of the train's departure. However, the two coupled cars did not move anywhere, looking like a stump. As I understand it, it's time to say goodbye, Institutov said, but something involuntarily weighed on him in his own words. In a few days this car will arrive in Gennady's homeland, of course, unless the train derails. Reality no longer indulges us with good news. Everything explodes, burns, goes to the bottom. Gennady's life also turned out to be offensively short. She ended tragically in flight, but let's not talk about sad things. Better remember Gennady again. Let's remember and spend a minute of silence on the last journey. Gennady, I'm sorry we didn't save you. Farewell, Dove. Everything had to end. However, the expectation of the end went on and on. Institutov stood up excitedly for more than a minute, but, suddenly ashamed that he had allowed himself to become emotional, stupidly could not resist amusing the morning that had just been inflicted with his own joke. The railway is the most reliable mode of transport. Something, but the rails with sleepers as they were, and will remain. Well, now to the station. There, check once again our precious trailer, ensign, whether it is in place, well, to the capital. Color TV. I would also like to make such a rare purchase these days. Father Mukin, by the way, you will also go with us now. You know, it will be calmer, otherwise the train will leave without you. And by chance, Ensign, didn't you get tickets in the same carriage with your father? Well, okay, we'll find out. To the station, my friends, to the station. But Father Mukin whined tearfully, today it has been 9 days since Gennady died. Comrades, I asked you to come to my hotel to celebrate this date with me. Shame on you, speculating on the memory of your own son. The commander exploded. His death took place 6 days ago. When you arrive in Moscow, drink there. Maybe you still have a birthday to submit here. Yes, what kind of commemoration can there be if he has not yet been buried? No, it's just some kind of delirium tremens. Grab this psychic, drag him to the car, there's nothing to fuss with this wino. However, no one dared to grab and drag the little man. What? Are you all out of your mind here? What kind of father is he anyway? For him, the death of his own son is an occasion for a glass to be poured for him, that's all. Well, on the train, my dear, you'll fill up the walleye, be patient, but now there's not enough time. Comrades, I asked you to celebrate this date with me, I heard mournfully again. I invite everyone to my hotel, not far from here. There is still a lot of time before the train leaves. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And what about you, my dear, have nowhere to hurry? No, it can't be. Wait, what hotel? Where? You have a train in an hour. No, wait, show me your ticket. You have a ticket, don't you? Answer me, Father Mukin, did you drink money for a return ticket? You vile, insignificant person, well, you should be present at the funeral of your own son. What hotel? Where? You have a train in an hour. No, wait, show me your ticket. You have a ticket, don't you? Answer me, Father Mukin, did you drink money for a return ticket? You vile, insignificant person, well, you should be present at the funeral of your own son. What hotel? Where? You have a train in an hour. No, wait, show me your ticket. You have a ticket, don't you? Answer me, Father Mukin, did you drink money for a return ticket? You vile, insignificant person, well, you should be present at the funeral of your own son. The drunken one hid his eyes and mumbled, it seemed, already under his breath, comrades. Gennady and I invite. All the peoples of the world honor this date, well, why do you lie and lie, shouted Institutov. But the little man was dejectedly silent. The escort, who had not yet opened his mouth with zeal, as was ordered, timidly jumped up to the chief medical officer and wailed, Albert Gennadevich without a ticket. Are they allowed on the train without a ticket? At least you don't go. What's your business? I, too, Uncle Vanya, the simple-hearted ensign stood up as if resting his chest against the wall, and suddenly rebelled with tears in his eyes, and such a thing, comrade chief medical officer, that he promised to assign him to his apartment. And you shut up, you yourself, I'm sorry, you're playing around. I did not intend to spend the night at the stations. Think Moscow. And Sunya, they will rip it off like sticky. I have 30 kopecks per person with an ordinary daily allowance, and you, shut up. And we won't be able to eat like a human, even if it's like dogs. He promised, said, you'll live with me, Ivan Petrovich, for free. I'll tell my wife that I spent money on hotels, huh? And the TV, and the carpet. All our lives we refused everything, saved up. Father Mukin gave a mournful voice, Ivan, I invite you. And don't ask, you killed me, Albert. I followed you like a family, I believed you, and now your personality has become alien to me after such a deception, so you know. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. Shut up, and we won't be able to eat like a human being, even if it's the same as dogs. He promised, said, you'll live with me, Ivan Petrovich, for free. I'll tell my wife that I spent money on hotels, huh? And the TV, and the carpet. All our lives we refused everything, saved up. Father Mukin gave a mournful voice, Ivan, I invite you. And don't ask, you killed me, Albert. I followed you like a family, I believed you, and now your personality has become alien to me after such a deception, so you know. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. Shut up. And we won't be able to eat like a human being, even if it's the same as dogs. He promised, said, you'll live with me, Ivan Petrovich, for free. I'll tell my wife that I spent money on hotels, huh? And the TV, and the carpet. All our lives we refused everything, saved up. Father Mukin gave a mournful voice, Ivan, I invite you. And don't ask, you killed me, Albert. I followed you like a family, I believed you, and now your personality has become alien to me after such a deception, so you know. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. You will stay with me, Ivan Petrovich, free of charge. I'll tell my wife that I spent money on hotels, huh? And the TV, and the carpet. All our lives we refused everything, saved up. Father Mukin gave a mournful voice, Ivan, I invite you. And don't ask, you killed me, Albert. I followed you like a family, I believed you, and now your personality has become alien to me after such a deception, so you know. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. You will stay with me, Ivan Petrovich, free of charge. I'll tell my wife that I spent money on hotels, huh? And the TV, and the carpet. All our lives we refused everything, saved up. Father Mukin gave a mournful voice, Ivan, I invite you. And don't ask, you killed me, Albert. I followed you like a family, I believed you, and now your personality has become alien to me after such a deception, so you know. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. And the carpet. All our lives we refused everything, saved up. Father Mukin gave a mournful voice, Ivan, I invite you. And don't ask, you killed me, Albert. I followed you like a family, I believed you, and now your personality has become alien to me after such a deception, so you know. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. And the carpet. All our lives we refused everything, saved up. Father Mukin gave a mournful voice, Ivan, I invite you. And don't ask, you killed me, Albert. I followed you like a family, I believed you, and now your personality has become alien to me after such a deception, so you know. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. I will only trust you. Maybe you'll put him, the scoundrel, on the train, huh? He's lying, I saw him, he's even lying about the hotel. These are not rooms, but some kind of wagons on wheels. Let's force it. Let him go, let him bury his son, the devil's alimony. No, that's all. Let him stay, that's who you don't feel sorry for, Institutov said. Wait, boss. And I accept the invitation. I love the ancient customs. The chief med wriggled as if he had grabbed onto something with his hands in the air, and that was the only reason he didn't fall. His eyes fumbled helplessly over the faces. He still believed that this voice seemed to be behind him. Let's go, Dad. Where did you want to go? Do not worry. Let's remember like people do. Pal Palich went up to the little weeping man, stood beside him, put his hand on his shoulder. Mukin's father raised his head, then smiled resignedly through his tears and said, Atomic workers, go ahead. At that moment, his hat fell off his head. For some reason, the little man looked indifferently at the headdress that had fallen under his feet, and Pal Palich was upset. Well, you raise your hat, but Institutov ran up, grabbed his hat in an instant and, not wanting to give it away, wailed, Where are we going? Who will go? Why go? Give me your hat. She is a stranger. Palich barked. Will not give it back. Will not give it back. Shouted the chief medical officer. Dad, do you need this hat? Well? Tell me. I don't need this hat, a languid, indifferent voice rang out. Pal Palich weakened, trembled, and something lightning passed through him. Darling, you are going straight to the zone, what are you doing? The chief medical officer whined plaintively. Yes, wait. I agree. We are going to the station, and then wherever you want. I also accept the invitation. Wait, we have a car. I order you to stop. Where are you going? Think about it, you are signing your own death warrant. You will rot behind bars. And you will put your head in a noose. Alyosha Kolmogorov was the last, whose fate was predicted by the chief medical officer, already without hope of returning him. He ran clumsily along the platform, catching up with those who were slowly leaving for one of its long, hopeless sides. Institutov came to his senses, recognizing the runner, and either with joy or enviously shouted after him, But you won't see your teeth. Standing beside him, the two staff members of the funeral team trembled. Comrade Chief Medical Officer, everyone is running, but where are we going? The simple-minded ensign begged in dismay, being ready, if anything, to run. Dorojenko. Kolmogorov, still on the platform, when the coffin was being loaded, recognized in this stray man the citizen who had come to the infirmary in the morning. He recognized it not by his face, but by his hat, when the drunk leaned against the wall, dropping his head on his chest, which was why his face to the chin was hidden by a wide-brimmed hat nimbus. Alyosha was afraid that the drunkard would raise his head, look up and recognize him too. Once he stopped, turned around and said in surprise, Who are you? Are you Gennadi's comrades? But there won't be enough places for all, but he lowered his head and walked on. Father Mukin led irrevocably into the depths of the cemetery in form and content of the area that stretched along the endless bony railway tracks. The remains of rails and sleepers, overgrown with grass or almost raised to the ground, now and then were found underfoot. The rumble of the ambulances was heard, like otherworldly, from another distance. Pal Palich traveled Karaganda far and wide, but did not remember that there were hotels somewhere nearby. The station itself was located on the edge of the city, where streets with high-rise city houses broke off and wooden houses swarmed like a beehive. The thought flashed through Pal Palich's head that the drunken man himself now did not know where he was walking. But to stop and thoroughly interrogate the one who led them to no one knows where, there was no spirit. Kill, or something, someone, he gritted through his teeth and casually, as if nothing had happened, he dropped loudly over his shoulder, Listen, profitable, but you, really, demobilized or so, lied for force. Truth. Tomorrow I will take the train and go home. Kolmogorov was in a hurry, but stumbled on the last word. Fugitive, they each kept their silence. Suddenly, the silent expanse gleamed with semaphore lights, where the railway flowed like a river of tracks before dispersing in 100 directions in all directions of the world. Father Mukin dived from the embankment and found himself on the tracks, stepping over the rails as if he were moving not in steps, but in rows. As soon as you entered the space of bottomless steel lines, an electric train mercilessly swept along one of them, slashing with a blade of light. She passed by, but as if she was rushing to kill someone. At the time when they were already crossing the railroad tracks, almost invisible in the night, it seemed that two initially tiny fireballs rolled out of the sky like lightning. Their rushing light expanded inexorably, so that the rails all around flared up like thick cord cords. Direct lightning slashed the whole expanse, each pointing only its own path. They, too, were rushing, already under their feet. Feeling nausea and fear, Pal Palich grabbed Alyosha and dragged him to a narrow island. The little man, as if nothing had happened, walked along the edge of steel lightning. Stop. We'll kill. Train. Lie down. There was a heart-rending cry. Mukin's father stopped, even turned around, but the rushing rumble and light struck him so much that he did not move. When the figure on the rails froze, a freight train rattlesnake showed itself and after a moment stretched out in the last throw. It was seen firsthand that the straight track, along which the train was carrying, squeezed the little man in its vice. His whole figure, standing about 100 meters away, became blacker than a shadow. The locomotive did not slow down. The man did not leave the path. However, when the roar, fire and whirlwind suddenly swept freely by the side, and after that the rumbling swift wall of cars flowed in its succession right behind the small pitiful figure, it became incredibly obvious that the drunken did not deliberately think to fall under the train. The whirlwind of the passing train still terrified him or deafened him. He clutched at his head, then pulled his hands away and held them out as if he were groping around him, closer and closer to the ground, until he was down on his knees. On the ground, too, fumbled with his hands, toiled, crawled back and forth. Grey regrown hair, mother of pearl steel in color, swirled by the passing composition, seemed to inspire the little head, making it look like a big strong bird. But the last car flew by, and the head fell, and the hair hung down weepingly, sadly, so that a face could hardly be seen from under them. Hat is missing, where is my hat? Father Mukin complained when they lifted him from his knees. Pal Palich said angrily, what other hat? You yourself are a hat. Where is my hat? The little man was outraged. All. Forget. Let's go faster. Pal Palich barked. Give me your hat, why are you guys doing this? Father Mukin persuaded. Dad, we don't have her, how can you not understand? There she is, your hat, where the train has taken. Ah, carried away, he calmed down indifferently. Take your suitcase. Here I stayed, not blown away. Thank you, Father Mukin said, and the heavy briefcase hung on the owner's arm. Guys, on this occasion, I ask everyone to go to the reactor hall. Today marks 9 days since my son Gennady passed away. Please note with me. You see, people themselves expressed their desire out of great respect for me. We understand, Pal Palich grinned and whispered furtively to Alyosha, it seems that they have arrived. Well, how are you? Maybe go back. You wind away tomorrow at will, so wind away. You still need to demand some clothes from this doctor, wash yourself, comb your hair, and the father, and I will wander somewhere, the father, and I have nowhere to rush further. Kolmogorov whispered in response, thinking that he also gave Pal Palich special confidence, nothing, I still have a lot of time. Only you left your car there, at the station. Maybe you should come back. But how will they arrive at the station without you? They'll stomp on foot, quickly. The main thing is that they handed over the luggage, got out of it, Pal Palich muttered. How can we manage to carry our own legs? Maybe we'll also rush to Moscow. Moscow, it's big, there's enough space for everyone. Only the hotel is something far away. Maybe this uncle lost his way. What will it be? If the guests have gathered, they will think that they have left or something, and everyone will go home. Guys, keep up, people are waiting for us. Father Mukina raised his voice. Keep. People. Pal Palich began to wail, shuddering with laughter. People, I'm coming to you. I love people. He forgot about everything and everyone, following somewhere at the behest of a defiant shrill laughter. Suddenly he tripped on the tracks, fell. Quiet. Got up. And he became maddeningly alone. With a low growl, he kicked the rails before stepping over them. Beaten by a blow of a boot, they disappeared from his attention. He detachedly made his way through the meridians of steel corpses with narrow bodies like those of worms. The train lights flared up. But now Pal Palich himself remained standing right on the tracks, spewing curses and curses. The passenger train swept past quite far away from him. "Fuck you, bitch, bastard, bastard," he yelled, tormented with the last of his strength, seeing a tangibly hateful death chariot in the rushing train of wagons. It seemed that there could be no other goal in this restless journey along the rails, how to cross the railway, but the little man led his limp companions farther and farther in the direction of the trains. Somehow it got darker, darker. The noise and the lights carried away into another distance. Lost creatures from the night began to wander, individual cars and entire trains, standing motionless on the tracks, cut off from their rushing fiery electric heads, as if killed by someone who was ahead of everyone. No one could see or hear the presence of people. Mukin's father, fearing nothing, entered the carriage labyrinth. Silent Pal Palich, as a small child, looked around among the sludge of seemingly gigantic cars, inside of which there was no life, thinking, probably, that he found himself in his personal hell. Identical rounded windows gleamed dark, as if he were peering into wells. Suddenly, white plaques with the numbers of carriages 2, 12, 6, 9, 3, 10, 8 displayed in some places in the windows were the same numbers as on the tear-off calendars, each time forced them to experience horror, similar from surprise to faces. The two trains along which they walked along a narrow, well-trodden path also had nameplates on them, very reminiscent of those found in all settlements where street names are indicated. It seemed that each car stood like a house on its own street. On one side stretched bluish houses on which it was read, Zelenograd, Novokuznets. But then flattened by melancholy, then erased by prescription, then suddenly brand new, vital, conscious to realism, which is why the initial letters, just like they were undressed, did not even let themselves be read. On the other stood the swampy gloomy train Turkestan, single-humped roofs, wagons linked, like camels, into a caravan. And behind them, drunk, it's like trolleys, with a residence permit, Kushka, Vakuta. It was worth going through the composition, as another began. Mukin's father turned into a gap between them, but there was no end to the wagons. They formed walls here and there, spinning their heads in their labyrinth. And stretched one by one, past, it seemed, almost real cities. You can't count them all and not remember them. This could have been imagined by people who had lost all hope, if it had not been a reality. Peaceful living lights lit up on the tracks, it smelled of stove smoke. Already at a dead end, showing itself there for something ordinary village, on the way stood a train, overgrown with antediluvian life, like a stump. From the tin chimneys of the orange-red carriages, whitish smoke seriously smoked into the night sky, and from the simple wooden porches arranged for the entrance to the vestibules, resinous warm light flowed to the ground. Opposite each car there was its own hill of anthracite and its own puddle, shimmering in the light of the moon like anthracite, as happens in courtyards, on ropes, but stretched from car to car, washed linen hung, shorts, sheets, pants, dresses, shirts. Almost every window, where the curtains were parted in the manner of backstage, looked like a puppet theatre, where bottles, vases, glasses, as if alive, played both joy and longing. On the sides of the carriages, in all their breadth, it was red, painted with white paint, hotel, 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 hotel. A dog was barking somewhere. A child was heard crying. There was a rush of cooking. On one porch a host woman showed up with a bucket, splashed slop into the darkness. She looked at those who were walking around the yard and sang, "Oh, hello, Albert Genadevich, maybe I splashed you and your guests." "No way, Golochka. Atomic workers' earthly dirt will not take. Everything is under my control. The radioactive background is within the normal range," Mukin's father reported loudly. "Oh, Albert Genadevich, where is your headdress? There was an emergency situation, honey, but we'll talk about it without witnesses. Are you all toiling, busying yourself, washing your own? Oh, what kind of people are there? These are refugees, everywhere they are dirty. Just like the gypsies, I'll tell you so, they don't work, they are dirty, rude. They cut each other, burn everything at home and ruin it, and then they come to us to make dirt. Soon we may have lice from them." And the authorities were smart enough to accommodate the refugees in the same hotel with the passengers. "We pay for the coupe, but it is free for them, since they are refugees, should everyone suffer." Exhausted by the boredom of her good female body, the hostess was not so indignant or complaining as she flaunted herself. She furrowed her brows, clasped her hands, turned herself as if on a stand, inviting to see from all sides. But Mukin's father had already turned gloomy and enthusiastically opened her eyes to what was happening. "There is thermonuclear decay in the country. According to my forecasts, the situation will change in 15 years. Not all of us will live to see that time, but I believe in atomic energy. We have enough uranium reserves. There will be light, it will be warm, and this is the main thing. Nuclear scientists will not let you down. Oh, Albert Genadevich, how can you explain everything in an accessible way, what is immediately done so logically in the soul? Thank you, they reassured me, otherwise the cats were right on it. Oh, what am I talking about? Mine and mine, you were taken to the place of your son's feet today. With 2 generals on a black Volga. And these are Gennady's comrades, accompanying me. I have no right to say more. He signed a non-disclosure agreement. The circumstances of my son's death will be declassified in 43 years. Oh, the responsible person completed the task, since it's a secret. Maybe they will give the order posthumously, and you look, and the hero, Albert Genadevich. Oh yes, you won't return your son, here it is, our life, like a hero, so die right away, and it's not supposed to live at least a little. The coffin was sent by train to Moscow. And in the next few days I will be by plane, nuclear scientists. Today marks 9 days since Gennady passed away. Checkmark, please celebrate this international date with me, only trusted and reliable people are invited. I ask you straight to the reactor hall. I know. I'll come, I'll bring my blinks. Oh, Albert Genadevich, sang the hostess. Guys, I'm ready. Father Mukin turned gloomily to young people in uniform, as if he was under their protection. But when they moved away, as if nothing had happened, he said with some lustful admiration, what a woman is an Arabian horse. Wife of a colonel in the Space Forces. The husband serves in Baikonur, a personal friend of Yuri Gagarin. She fearlessly cheated on him in search of true love. He kicked her out of the house with 2 children. Goes to his mother in Ulyanovsk. Temporarily awaiting tickets. 4th chest size. Speculators have enough flour. Fries thermonuclear pancakes with egg and cabbage. World snack. The drunk perked up, even sobered up, perhaps with the thought of a drink. Fatigue, as such, did not take his degree all the way. Please go straight to the reactor hall, he once again said with defiant generosity, inviting him to go up to the porch of one of the yellow-red cars. The massive iron door with a porthole that opened the passage to the vestibule was locked. But as soon as Mukin's father knocked on her with his fist in a businesslike way, a simple, clear face of a greeter appeared on the other side. Albertic, I report to you, all the people are assembled, and the table has long been set. Worried about what happened to you. There was an opinion that you would not come again. And I knew that he would return, he would keep his word. The good-natured, efficient man admired. In his rooming house on wheels, he must have still performed the work of a conductor, but for some reason he was dressed in all his uniform for the night, a cap with a railway badge, a suit, shirt, tie. What kind of people? Verified. Reliable? The little man asked anxiously. People are tested and reliable. The table was laid, gathered, waiting. Albertic, don't hesitate, assured a man in a dark blue suit of the Ministry of Railways. Do you realize what date is today? The reactor must operate at full capacity. Today, nuclear engineer Albert Mukin pays last respects to his son. The guide answered faithfully, I understand. We lead to God in paradise, we will do everything right. Albertic, don't doubt it. Okay, you realize this, Father Mukin mumbled, becoming bored. These 2 are with me. That's how it should be. Let's go, why stand in the cold? Well, come on, I'll take a briefcase. Guys, guests, we'll be like family. You are me, no doubt about it. Albertic. Where is your hat? What else is up? Old man, she is no more. All. Let's forget about her. Old man, life is shit, and everything in this life is shit. All. Except atomic energy, friendship, and death, and everything in this life is shit. All. Except atomic energy, friendship, and death, and everything in this life is shit. All. Except atomic energy, friendship, and death. The car turned out to be a reserved seat, of which thousands and thousands were on the way at the same hour, going around all the regions, republics, cities of a huge country. As if the ceiling was leaking with electric light. Tightness in the aisle. A fog of edible darlings, when fried, boiled, homemade, purchased, rations smell all together and slowly decompose in the warmth of the dwelling. Shy partition walls. The regiments on the left, the regiments on the right, all free, without people, but their voices were heard more and more clearly. Mukin's father went to the sound of voices so importantly that he forced them to crowd behind him. He is an amazing and unique person, the restless conductor of the reserved seat was pushing from behind. What are we? We live and sleep, but such a person lives and does not close his eyes for all of us. Another settled down in trade or somewhere else, for himself alone, and such a person chooses a profession, which gives warmth and light to all. He is sick with his soul, formulates, declares, creates. And how much does he endure? Where there is some misfortune in the country, there he is, closing with himself. He gave his all, even his son. We do not save such a person, because we save ourselves. People showed up on the other half of the car. In the compartment where everyone gathered, Mukin's father must have lodged, calling his separate regiment in at number. He was greeted in mournful silence, which also seemed to be pulled together. Around the laid table, with even a funeral meal, fit a dozen guests. The table was homemade. Someone cunningly invented a plank bridge between the folding tables, which were fastened on different sides, each at its own window. The homemade countertop was covered with white sheets. This is how a natural altar for the commemoration was arranged, the entire length of which could fit the coffin of the one who was escorted by the whole world. The guests sat closely along it in the passenger seats, the lower shelves were occupied, and in the aisles they were still sitting on boards thrown over also in the form of walkways. On the top shelves and on the side top. One lower shelf was immediately vacated with the arrival of the owner and given a place to an atomic engineer. He portrayed that his body was guarded by young men in uniform and was silent, gloomy and sublime. All this had a strong effect on the audience. The guests froze in their places, looking with the same gloomy loftiness at Father Mukin, while the hero of the occasion himself plunged into examining the table. Father Mukin examined the offerings with the indifference and pride of a well-fed man. His stern gaze searched for alcohol and was tempted only by what was bottled. On the spire of one of them, in appearance, a vodka, his eyes completely froze and also glazed over. Vodka. He admired involuntarily, bewitched. Don't doubt, Albertic, she's the one, I got it on a coupon, especially for you. More canned food and sunflower oil from humanitarian aid. He gave everything of his own, the guide was glad to say in public, but blushed instantly from embarrassment. Then I will ask you to provide me with 150 grams, Father Mukin said immediately. Pour everyone. I declare redness number 1. I will ask everyone and everyone to listen carefully. He became half disgusting, half pitiful at that moment of liveliness, although the assembled listened to him and were ready only to mourn. Sorrow, however, also took possession of his face when he began to talk about himself, as if he had deigned to be present at his own wake. The universe consists of atoms, and I, Albert Mukin, in this country was involved in an association called Special Atom. A universe without atoms is shit. An hour ago, I stood at the coffin of my son, and I was not ashamed of him. The son of Albert Mukin became an atom in the universe. He left like a real nuclear scientist, he stepped into his flaming reactor. I ask everyone to understand this. And now I will say in the verses of my favorite poet Yevgeny Yevtushenko, death is not a harbor, death cuts off the paths of ships. Gennady, Father is with you. I forgive you for what you did, old man. We will meet in the universe. When Father Mukin replenished himself with 150 grams of vodka after the speech, he lost any interest in what was happening. Out of necessity, people were still fumbling with snacks. He did not take a bite and stared into the empty facete glass, so that the animation at the table suddenly became separate, even indecent. The guests quieted down prematurely, he still continued to be in complete silence in front of his glass, as if all his grief had gathered in it. Someone could not stand this silence and, thinking, probably, to please, he distinguished himself with a sincere question, tell me, what, after all, was the cause of Gennady's death? My son died defending democracy. Father Mukin minted. The reserved seat soared murderously in some kind of high fall. There were no more questions. No one dared voluntarily doubt or even question, and even more so to hint at something else. Everyone loftily waited for the moment of silence to end, but someone again could not stand it and, from overflowing high feelings, rose to his full height, like a convict during the announcement of the verdict. But Father Mukin stubbornly did not open his mouth, so that silence turned for almost everyone in the torture of shame. "Albertic, what's the matter with you?" The conductor got scared. "My son didn't have any vodka," he said without changing his expression. "What do you think? Someone feels sorry for this vodka." "Oh, you." Everything around was alarmed again. They got a glass, poured vodka, and put a slice of black bread on top. Mukin's father said, "Put my glass next to Gennadi's." When the conductor silently carried out his will, he suddenly gave a command, frightening people, "Everyone drinks." Those gathered emptied their glasses in one gulp, but here they saw that Father Mukin had not touched his. "Albertic." "Yes, what is it?" "I don't drink anymore today." "Old man, you must." "People." "Ask everyone to stay where they are." The reassured guests remained in their places and began to hastily eat. The herring and aspic dispersed in an instant, and already in the appendage they chewed bread, loaded themselves with potatoes. Everything important was soon eaten. There were conversations about life and death. The people on the top shelves were the first to vote, as they needed help getting tidbits. They also started to philosophize with those who sat downstairs and grimly handed them plates upstairs. One young lady, quickly drunk, grew bolder and undertook to serve 2 soldiers in the manner of a hostess. She piled full plates of inedible watery kucha, and then she exclaimed capriciously, with weakness and sweetness in her voice, "Men, why don't you drink?" Pal Palich, whom the lady gave, moreover, with a glance of bewilderment, grinned at her face and quickly replied, "A real man is the one who drinks last and sobers up first." "Young man, are you a real man?" "Oh, it looks like I didn't introduce myself." "Elena." "And you?" "To friends and whores, I'm just called Raphael." The lady shriveled up dejectedly. Violet stains appeared through the rough layer of powder, underpainted with a girl's blush. She decided not to be offended right away and in the voice of an arrogantly indifferent teacher said, "Forgive me, and to what kind of your acquaintances do you attribute me?" Pal Palich hesitated, forcing the lady to wait, and suddenly smiled, "We don't know each other, I haven't drunk vodka with you yet." "Let's perform this sacred act," the drunken woman exclaimed thoughtlessly. "Elena the beautiful," he whispered so that only she could hear. "Raphael, let's be friends." "Let's drink, Raphael." Her babble flooded over the feast. "There are no questions, and even with such a luxurious woman." The real man answered, and his eyes lit up with a deadly, cruel light. "There are no questions, and even with such a luxurious woman." The real man answered, and his eyes lit up with a deadly, cruel light. "There are no questions, and even with such a luxurious woman." The real man answered, and his eyes lit up with a deadly, cruel light. The lady tried to give her clumsy drunken staggering over the table some kind of intricate grace. She waltzed around glasses of vodka, set aside side by side to father and son, which, except for her, no one looked at, content with moonshine. She wanted to grab them on the sly, but Father Mukin prevented everything, whose senselessly sorrowful look also wandered around this facade monument erected on the table at his will. "Well, why doesn't anyone drink this vodka? After all, someone will need to drink it so that it doesn't disappear," she finally exclaimed. "Soldering is sacred." "Soda, what to the dead, what to the living, give it and forget it." "You see, Lenoka, everything here is deeply sincere, even though from the outside it seems to be an ordinary still life. The glass is the grave. Black bread is covered, so the grave is covered with earth. Vodka in a glass, she's the soul. When it evaporates and the glass is empty, that's it, cleaned up, left. At the moment we are sitting like boobies watching this natural phenomenon." "Ha ha, Raphael, what a funny anecdote." "I don't want to know anything about these horrors of yours. I hate." "Sorry, I'm still alive. I want to know everything about flowers, about the sea, about love." It sounded like blasphemy. Like decent people, her neighbors turned away from the lady. But word for word, everyone quarreled amicably about love and death. Loud, noisy, blazing tongues. And everyone sticks out himself, as if jumping up and stating that he is here, too, with his own opinion, very much even there. Over the sounding voices, now and then someone's already insane cries were heard, "Love is sex, there is no God." And he breathed his last as soon as he got together with such a falling asleep Father Mukin, who woke up, however, not agreeing with anything and no one, and every time he hummed farewell, I'll destroy everything. People in a dispute burned like firewood. Soon as fire went down to a mournful burning, the debaters broke into heaps. Someone completely fell silent with disappointment. Outside the windows of the carriages, the night grew black. During all this time, no more significant incidents happened, well, except that pancakes, promised by the hostess to Mukin's father, appeared for a few minutes and disappeared, and she herself remained near him, angry at everyone who ate her treat. Outsiders wandered into the noise from other cars and stood in a narrow aisle, as if in a queue, probably out of habit to line up in it, but they were not given anything, neither to speak, nor to drink or eat. Through the line of these grown-up hangers-on, people drunk and downcast, judging by their appearance, as well as several neat and poor old women, a girl suddenly squeezed to the memorial table, which was the size of an ownerless soldier's pea coat in which she walked. Her loose resinous hair tucked her up to her shoulders like a handkerchief. The swarthy wild muzzle that looked out like an old woman, grimaced in pain. Stumbling at the backs of those sitting at the table, the girl began in a hoarse, rough voice, "Give me something to eat. Give me some bread." The beggar who climbed under the arm was shoved away without looking with her elbows. She was not offended, only it seemed to her surprising that so many people had gathered to eat, and fenced off with their backs as if from her alone. She stopped, still pleased to be first in line at the table, peeping at her food. Hungry, it seemed to her that the big strange table was full of fragrant, most delicious dishes. And, even though she asked for bread, looking only at the plates, perhaps soiled with the remnants of food, by the power of her imagination she laid out on them either the sweetest grapes, or honeycombs of melons, or steaming pieces of boiled lamb, everything that she had eaten once upon a time. This contemplation of her own mirage pleasantly put her to sleep. Probably, from exhaustion, she wanted to lie down and fall asleep even more. But something persistently pushed her in the side. The girl opened her eyes, which were stuck together from drowsiness, and with displeasure saw someone's outstretched hand, which seemed to be begging already from her. The girl looked sternly and condemningly at the beggar, who turned out to be a soldier sitting at the same table, not noticing a bar of chocolate that peeked out of the sleeve of a soldier's overcoat, straight as a stick, where the giver's hand was almost completely hidden. Seeing the soldier in front of her, the beggar was almost delighted, opening her gloomy lips, but the smile disappeared from her beaming face in an instant when Kolmogorov smiled too. Like a scarecrow, this soldier smiled like a beggar or a freak who begs for something and humiliates himself. All these people, who were called Russians, were stupid and greedy in her eyes. Stupid, because it was easy to deceive them, and greedy, because they always scraped out, like the ladder, only a penny. In her soul she even despised all Russians for some reason. Now, in a hungry drowsiness and also from indifference, she did not understand what one of them wanted from her. What was happening, however, was clearly seen by the pancake widow, the colonel's wife, who, shaking the air with her breasts as if waving two fists, lashed out shoutingly at Alyosha, don't give her anything. Run her. She might have lice. A prostitute. Shouted a little man in a soldier's pea jacket, looking around surrounded by stupid and greedy people who were looking from all sides. The scolded colonel's wife went limp in fear. The girl was breathing rapidly, like a hunted animal waiting for death, although the guests looked at her indifferently and understood little when drunk. She shouted something desperately and angrily, cursing in her own language that alien that brought her only fear and shame, and suddenly rushed under the protection of the soldier, and already, to the general laughter, she wrapped her arms around him with all her passion, almost like a woman in love, which became funny. The colonel's wife could not squeeze out a sound at first. Tears poured out of her painted doll eyes. The mascara ran, causing 2 bluish spots under the eyes. Am I a prostitute? Me. She groaned in a trembling voice, as if she had been beaten. Little beggar. The colonel's wife sobbed and, before disappearing away, squealed in the direction of the guests. Did they eat my damn pancakes? Didn't they disdain? I know who is dissolving this dirty opinion about me. But who herself is? Just think, educated, skinny, tasteful. Maybe I'm not so skinny, maybe I don't know how to wag what she wag, but I made my children with my husband, they all have parents with me, all are well-groomed, well-fed, healthy. I am an honest woman. Although I am temporarily divorced, but never with the first person I meet. I'm waiting for my ideal, great love, and she will leave the child and run around the cars, bitch. She even smells like that. She may have got lice already from this. Look, look, maybe full underpants, and she grabbed Father Mukin by the breasts. Albert Genadevich, you invited me to a wake, and I came with my pancakes, and they insulted me here. Albert Genadevich, you are a scoundrel. I don't want to know you anymore after this. The drunken man dutifully let himself be shaken, scolded as a scoundrel, and was insensibly silent. When she jumped headlong from behind the memorial table, no longer as if beaten, but as if naked, hiding all of herself fearfully in her own convulsive arms, Father Mukin must have felt a cold emptiness beside him and mournfully said, "What a woman! What a woman!" And a minute later a mournful hubbub rose again at the table. Everyone kept arguing with everyone. The girl climbed heavily onto her knees to the soldier, goading him, how slow-witted, to help, and when she sat down, she herself took the chocolate from him, hid it discreetly, slyly asked for another one, but again hid it. "It's bad that you swear." "Girls should not swear," Kolmogorov said. She closed her lips sullenly, slid down, and waddled like a goose, probably back to where she came from. When the beggar disappeared into the twilight of the second-class carriage, Alyosha, at the thought that he had offended her, felt homesick and drooping, remembering how weak and hungry she was. Time has passed. Suddenly something soft and light touched his back. It was the beggar clinging to him slowly, checking whether he was the right person and whether he had forgotten her, but she pretended that she had not gone anywhere, but remained here, next to him. Stretching out her long, flexible neck, thus bringing the swarming sounds of arguing voices closer to her, she listened seriously, peered into faces, not tearing her all-understanding inquisitive gaze even for a moment, as if she were not a witness, but a judge. "So you came," Alyosha said, feeling forgiven. She heard, glared at him with the same piercingly tender look, and laughed, pleased with herself, thinking that this clumsy kind man liked her beauty, and finally reassured that he, too, had not disappeared anywhere. She clasped the sleeve of the soldier's overcoat, as though she wanted to climb up Alyosha's arm like a monkey. Alyosha endured it all. She laughed again, because he was pushing, puffing to keep her on weight, and admired herself, "But I'm so heavy." Then she strongly pulled his hand towards her, so that Kolmogorov had to give up, and then, probably with a desire to delight, she exclaimed, "That's how strong." For some reason, she felt very good, and she whispered, "It's possible, I'll just tell you slowly." As sitting on the soldier's knees, the girl clung to him to be even closer, and whispered, proud that she was becoming an adult. He did not see her face, feeling only a warm, measured breath somewhere at the temple. I dutifully listened. And she became bored, as if she were playing all alone. Immediately she forgot everything and began to simply chat incessantly. "I know a lot of soldiers. The soldiers brought us here. The soldiers gave us food and drink, they gave us a pea jacket, pills. Do you have a machine gun? All the soldiers have machine guns, I saw. Where is your machine, where?" For some reason, Kolmogorov lied, as if he had to come up with a fairy tale. "I have a machine gun, but I forgot to take it with me." "You can kill." The girl was delighted. Alyosha mumbled, "It's very bad when they shoot at people from a machine gun." "You better sit down, eat." "You wanted to eat." "Then why do you have a machine gun?" the beggar inquired stubbornly. He was silent, and the girl frowned, but, though angry, she climbed on her knees to a soldier to treat her. And again she shoved everything she got into the pockets of her pea jacket, as if chocolates and pieces of bread were food for their own voracious mouths. "But I forgot to take it with me." "You can kill." The girl was delighted. Alyosha mumbled, "It's very bad when they shoot at people from a machine gun." "You better sit down, eat." "You wanted to eat." "Then why do you have a machine gun?" the beggar inquired stubbornly. He was silent, and the girl frowned, but, though angry, she climbed on her knees to a soldier to treat her. And again she shoved everything she got into the pockets of her pea jacket, as if chocolates and pieces of bread were food for their own voracious mouths. "But I forgot to take it with me." "You can kill." The girl was delighted. Alyosha mumbled, "It's very bad when they shoot at people from a machine gun." "You better sit down, eat." "You wanted to eat." "Then why do you have a machine gun?" the beggar inquired stubbornly. He was silent, and the girl frowned, but, though angry, she climbed on her knees to a soldier to treat her. And again she shoved everything she got into the pockets of her pea jacket, as if chocolates and pieces of bread were food for their own voracious mouths. This time she did her job as a rat with almost no diligence, even though she left the memorial table with puffy, tummy-like pockets. She did not believe Kolmogorov. She thought that he shot, but now he lied. And she said, again wearily getting ready somewhere, "I will come to you, and we will drink tea. This train will not leave anywhere. I know you can leave and come." In the twilight, smacking their lips, they ate hot tea, the guide regaled them. Each one spoke languidly about his own, and in some places at the table voids already gaped. Father Mukin fell asleep in the same position in which he grieved. He buried himself on the table, hugging him with his arms, which had become stiff for many hours and now folded into a woodpile on which lay, as if on a chopping block, his grey-haired dirty head. On the other hand, one of his bodyguards excited those around him with some kind of desperate fun, catching and bullying everyone around. Pal Palich, aka Raphael, gave no rest to anyone. He had fun, and everyone had to have fun, even if they didn't want to, and especially the pitiful drunken lady, whom he didn't let go anywhere, calling Elena the beautiful with laughter, forcing her to eat something from his hands, squeezing under the table. She kicked capriciously, but she was no longer able to squeeze out even a few intelligible phrases. The conductor walked alone around the car, brought glasses of tea, and in between, when he patiently waited for someone else to want some tea, he sat down next to the sleeping and just as lonely nuclear engineer, as if talking to him silently about something. He was invigorated, as at work, but he experienced such peace from everything that he was ready to serve for free, knowing neither despondency nor fatigue. He liked to sit next to Father Mukin, and while he was sleeping, it was like serving this amazing, unique person. I like to carry glasses around the sleepless night car. I like that there are so many reliable and trusted people around. That boiling water in glasses smokes thickly and floats, giving him all the juices, his own tea leaves, the price of which, however, he did not know. I usually took so much for a glass of tea, how much they gave, if only they ordered, otherwise for some reason he could not. Tea has disappeared from stores for a year now. He heard on the radio that there was no tea in the whole country. Steep packs of tea stolen by someone and somewhere, the conductor exchanged for a gratuitous coal, which also turned out to be stolen, because he drowned his hotel car thinner, and so he took care of the guests, putting hot tea for them, as well as for passengers on the way, the main thing in life. Give us 2 glasses of tea without sugar, the girl said importantly when she returned, and the good, efficient man happily came to life. It will be done, mistress. 2 glasses of tea with sugar, he commanded himself and ran. Kolmogorov was not happy about her return and was frightened of something when the beggar climbed onto his knees, wanting to sit at the table just like that. He could not offend her, but he was already homesick and drooping at the closeness of this precocious adult, strange homeless girl, feeling the shame that came with her. Seeing the table in front of the girl empty, Pal Palich became furious and exclaimed, "Bastards, are you sorry for her grub? Well, sister, let's take everything from them. You need to eat, grow, but they don't. They will die tomorrow. See? All to you. Eat by yourself and don't give it to anyone." He scooped everything edible from the table to one end, where the girl was sitting on Kolmogorov's lap, and threatened, "Look, don't hurt my sister, otherwise I'll bite off my nose. She alone can speak to me here. Do you all understand? Her why, sister, eat up, I said. Whoever touches her, I will kill." The girl was silent. This soldier frightened her, and, it seemed, was even more stupid and greedy than all those from whom he had taken food for her. When he left them alone and turned away, she moved the plates away from her, to those people from whom he had taken everything. She left only a few pieces for herself, and set aside the same amount a little aside, for Alyosha. After a pause, she said aloud something that probably took away her peace. "This is a very bad person. Why did you let this man scream at you? I'll kill him myself if I find a gun." Kolmogorov did not know what to say to her in response, and asked, "What is your name?" "Adam." "Adam?" Kolmogorov asked again, so that he had something to talk about. "It looks like smoke. And you look like a camel." She muttered contemptuously. "Is that your name? You have to drink tea." "I love tea. We all drank a lot of tea at home." "Do you have your own house?" "Yes. Tomorrow I will take the train and go home." The girl frowned. "Will your train go far?" she asked already weakly, as if for some reason she was ashamed to ask about it. Alyosha sweetly forgot himself, remembering the house, and spoke for a long time, as if he was sitting in a train car, and, not remembering himself, was driving home days and nights. Adam listened, peered into the excited face disfigured by a convulsive smile, as if with a scar, for a long time without tearing off this understanding, inquisitive look, and she herself suddenly silenced the soldier when she said aloud, "I will be your wife." "What?" "Well, get married, lech. At least I'll goof off in the end." The soul is all frayed. Well, how can you not understand? There was a joyful suffering howl around the table. There is no one better than my sister, and don't think about it. We orphans, do you know how to love? Oh. Heart to heart like a nail nailed, that's what it is, our love. Or maybe you're squeamish. Yes, don't look that she's dressed like a scarecrow. She's made of gold, a girl, with a diamond inside, I'm telling you that. Yes, marry you, fool, ask God to you. Oh, hell, okay, my patience has run out. So, once and for all, in the name of all authorities, hell and God, death and life, I declare you, sister and brother, as husband and wife. And what are you mouths open, bastards? Not happy? You were guests at the wake, and now we have a holiday, everyone is visiting at our wedding, did you smell it? So, everyone rejoice, otherwise I'll kill you. And he yelled at the top of his voice, bitterly. With the same force from the soul, Pal Palich suddenly grabbed his lady, already disheveled by his courtship, and dug into her lips, clenched with fear. The kiss was defiantly long. The guests were numb, but squeezed out smiles and chuckles. She, Elena, came to life a minute later. The stiffened arms twitched, the legs that stuck out like sticks from a strangled female body like a boa. She could be heard pitifully whining through her closed mouth. And even though he received this first kiss from her, he got excited, playfully, on purpose to torment, he grumbled into her aching mouth, probably depicting insane passion. She went limp again in his arms, he generously stopped the torture. When he let go, she fell out, looking like a corpse, with a face mask in which her mouth seemed to cut a hole, hot and plump, with crimson petals of her lips. They moved, let go. Help, it's too late to portray a non-smoker, her tormentor grinned, pleased with himself. Let's smoke a cigarette, and go to mom and dad. I will make you a sea of love, all in flowers, you yourself asked. Aiden, hiding her face, puffed hoarsely into the soldier's greatcoat, burying herself in it as if in her husband. Kolmogorov himself, as if lost, stared at his partner. I heard that he called himself by a new name, and for some reason waited with humility for the latter to speak to him and turn out to be himself again, the former. However, the new hero was blissful. Spread out on a shelf, one hand, like a collar, hung around the neck of a lifeless lady, and the other conducted with a smirk to the guests. Those, at his request, pronounced toasts. Then he wanted songs, and he tightened it hoarsely. The blue carriage is running, swaying, the fast train is picking up speed, and not hearing that they sang along with him, he made a brutal face, meaning, sing, otherwise I'll kill you. People plaintively in discord picked up in very childish voices, oh, what a pity that it all ends, and he rapturously soloed, squinting in tearful languor. Alyosha also picked it up, along with everyone else. He used to obey his mysterious partner. Yearned for some kindness. I could, of course, not know those words and melody, I heard it many times in my childhood, and after that, it seemed, I didn't hear it and forgot it for a long time. But suddenly he took it and began to sing, croaking in the same way as in the ranks, disgusting to the musical ear, but in unison and loudly. When her soldier began to sing, the girl fell silent, hearing in his chest a similar to the furnace, even, deep rumble. She was scared and angry, but she became kind and happy. Kolmogorov felt that an oppressive heaviness had left his soul, as it had been when Aiden, gasping for breath, pressed herself into him with anger. Chest overlaid, like cotton wool, a pleasant tickling warmth. Yes, perhaps, Alyosha took possession of it, while he happily, forgetting himself, sang loudly, loudly. And the spiders of tenacious agile hands climbed up the soldier's greatcoat, climbed into the pockets one by one, rummaged through the unexpected emptiness. Not finding what she thought of only from happiness, Aiden became timid, knowing that under the overcoat the soldier should have even more pockets than outside. The girl did not dare to touch close to his body. She despaired of spinning her web. She jerked her hands away. And, not knowing the words of someone else's Russian song. Skaye terchu, skaye adaryu, yes, the Alni path is fading, and why rest right into the sky od, ka waiting, kaane. In Luyu the best is fanning, the wedding played and sang. Under the guise of this sadness joy, Father Mukin woke up in the twilight of the reserved seat. Sleepy, insipid eyes bulged like those of a fish, and, already offended, surveyed what was happening. Moreover, he seemed to be deaf, looking at the singing mouths. I did not understand at what time and place I found myself. I only realized with disgust, again like some kind of fish, that I was among people. Drawn ashore, stunned by the feeling of his own sobriety, Mukin's father occasionally came to life from a sigh and exhalation, no longer closing his eyes. He gulped air, but it did not quench his thirst. In front of him, with silent mourning, stood 2 facete glasses in which vodka shone like lead. They stood, as if pressed down on top by identical pieces of black bread, which had become stale and even blacker during these hours. "Our father has arrived," Pal Palich, aka Raphael, cordially noticed the straightened figure at the table. "Come on, tell me where you've been, what feats you've accomplished. I love listening to stories. So it seems you know everything is the same, even though the howl of a wolf. And I want everything the way it does not happen." "Well, is that a question?" "Whether I know or not is the question." "But I know. Ma. Well, why is there no accuracy in life, tell me? Why are you silent? You invented a fairy tale, but you don't understand about your life, or you pretend. Well, you'll just understand, I risked my skin for this. I looked at you when you stood at attention there on the platform and thought, this should not be. After all, Dad, I know who shot, drove everything and knows about everyone. Do you hear what a fairy tale is? Soon you will know that. Your son took for a death. You don't want to, but you know. You will know everything." Mukin's father was silent, looking all the same at one point. He seemed to have endured a blow with a stick on his back, from which he only stretched convulsively in growth. "Well, at attention again. I would have crushed you. Tired of you. Are you a worm or a man?" Eyes piercing with pain, this time glared straight at the target, which is why Pal Palich, aka Raphael, came to his senses and fell silent. Suddenly the little man found the gift of speech, gloomily said, "Where is my hat?" Dad. What kind of person are you?" "The hat is gone." "You left her for a walk," the serviceman was gracious. "Who are you?" Another question came up. "And I will be like hello to you from the other world. Gina Mukin sent me to you to whisper something. Have you heard of such a thing? About your own son? Only he is not a hero at all. An officer fired at him, like his own boss, because he wanted to. The pistol was in a holster. Strength, not the right word. If you want, execute. If you want, have mercy, just like God for others. Hands itch, freak out, so he fired his shot, took it out of his holster once. He is now treating nerves in the infirmary, because it is necessary. And now your son in zinc clothes is going to feed the worms, because it is necessary. And all just hurry, as soon as possible, so that life goes on. Yes, I was born by mistake, lived by mistake, all by mistake. Well, that means it's been fixed. And you fix it, you bastard, drink vodka. And that's all. It's sickening to live." Silence broke out again, heard before every creak, every rustle. People fidgeted. On the upper shelves everyone was listening, but they instantly pretended to be asleep. Raphael, the lady mumbled defiantly in her dope, but suddenly she began to snore disgustingly. The knight entered the second-class carriage, as if into a tightly boarded-up coffin. Another wilderness and darkness, deep underground, probably enters. One of the guests, who was sitting on the edge, rushed and fled. Someone giggled. It was stuffy. "Perhaps another tea?" bustled the conductor. Mukin's father grabbed one of the glasses in front of him, in which vodka remained, and quickly emptied it. "What do we do?" Alyosha was surprised, looking around him and not understanding anything. "Calm down, this train is on schedule. Do not fuss, profitable, you will have time to get off. It's easy. Your ticket to life will not be lost. The main thing is that you have nothing to do with it, remember. This is for me, there are no stops, a one-way ticket, and the path is round, like a wheel. I feel sorry for others, but my own even in the fire. Maybe I don't feel pain, I'm used to it. I can put out cigarettes with my tongue wherever you want to drive a nail into yourself, it doesn't hurt, it's not a pity. Well, okay, I'll ride. Well, sing then, or something, in parting, that was good. Don't you want to? Proud. Then I'll sing alone. Don't love me. And I don't love you, but I'll sing for you, I'll sing, oh, how I'll sing, and you will only feel sorry for yourself. This time, in the reserved seat, they did not even know the words or the melody of that sad orphan song that Pal Palich sang as a stranger to everyone, like a tramp. No matter how much inspiration he had, he could not cope with his voice alone. Dragged on something false, as if he was pretending to sing, wishing, however, to open his soul, to become close to people, and not just to make one more face, to fake it. But he had the courage, and perhaps the humble unexpected strength, to pull painful for himself, coming out, it seemed, boastful and cute sounds. Guests seized indifferent impotence. They listened involuntarily, without making any movements, constrained by this pause that had come in their lives. It was long, so that the air in the compartment of the reserved seat was charged with sour and stale, like electricity in a small flat battery, the breath of one person. The voice trembled, subsided, and then broke off when, approaching and growing, as if through the thickness of non-existence, the same knock began to break through to the people in the reserved seat car. Close, right under the windows, the ground was muffled and dull by the shot of the dashes. There was a lone cry that was sharp and clear, probably the boss, after whom the bad barking of dogs rushed to torment the air. Everyone listened, numb. The furious clatter of boots burst into the emptiness of the carriage. Police! Rushed towards the inviting eccentric cry. But in that coma that raged in the narrow neck of the car, the cocoons of army overcoats became discernible. The beam of a lantern or lanterns, also furious, with pupils like those of headlights, was already dazzling with a distant light and fumbled over their faces. Everything burned in his eyes. A friendly, strong wave of Roundup fell on the barricade of the memorial table with a running start. Boards shattered, some getting stuck in the walls or poking at people with pikes, others breaking with the sound of shots under their own pressure. The crockery screeched in the crush underfoot. Suddenly there was a triumphant cry, either "Grab them, my dears," or "Grab them, my dears." A few moments later, from the roar, the screech, a deadly scream escaped. And not immediately, but they shouted around the car in a relay race, "They killed a man, help, your mother, give light here, still alive." Wounded, that is, still alive, he was carried out of the car like a mattress. They hurried like they were on fire. For the first 10 minutes, when in the chaos of the roundups they began to shout about what had happened, panic reigned. It seemed that they discovered that they were on fire. The limp heavy body of this man, whose clothes were covered with bloody fire before his eyes, was dragged, either saving or escaping. We found ourselves with him in the dark on a bare, dank patch by the carriage. They kept me in ignorance of where to run and what to do, on weight, by the arms and legs, because even a stretcher had to be obtained from somewhere. The two soldiers of the commandant's company kept loosening their grip. The body in their hands could no longer hold, slipping, falling through, as if into a hole. The man groaned in pain and humiliation, feeling that he had been forgotten. Then he found the strength to lament, because he wanted to stay alive. "Where is the ambulance? Doves! Do something! What are you doing? It hurts. I end up dying." The senior army patrol was exhausted to hear the whining and said in his heart, as if cursing, "Let him down, he's tired of it." What this meant, the bleeding man did not understand, but he felt reassuringly that he was lying on his back, in full growth, not feeling the cold of the earth on which he was lowered. They were looking for help urgently, here, and they were wasting time in vain. They found cotton wool, a bandage. In order to at least plug the wound from which the blood was leaving, it was necessary to remove the murder weapon from it. In the man's chest still sat that sharpened, deadly piece of iron, like a pin, which had been driven in, no one knows how dangerously or deep, but to the very edge. The elder, seeing this, was afraid to take responsibility. The awakened, frightened people poured out of the cars. In the crowd of onlookers, at least some medical worker was not found. It soon became clear that the rooming house on wheels had no connection with the world. A runner was sent to the station to call an ambulance. This soldier ran with all his strength for help or beware, but on his return they waited again in vain. Having accepted the challenge, the car with the doctor could not find the entrances to this dead end. Maybe she got lost somewhere else. Maybe it turned back a long time ago. The crowd at the scene dispersed into the cars to fill up. The senior patrol was warming himself in the same car where they caught two AWOL soldiers who had left their chief, one of whom by that time had been identified as his own killer. They were already waiting for the police to register deserters. The runner was again sent to the station, now to the duty unit. 3 bodies lay around the carriage under guard, left in the same wind and cold, surrounded by darkness, soldiers from the commandant's company. 2 of the living lay face down on the ground, spreading their legs and arms as if on a cross. One dead man, whose arms and legs were calmly folded, looked up at the sky. That the head of the medical unit of the Karaganda regiment gave his soul to God and understood from his eyes when they completely glazed over, they froze, like a November mud in the night, flickering all around with the same icy surprised brilliance. So I died. These eyes said, what a lousy life this is. What a lousy sky this is. Out of the cloak that was on the corpse, invisible to anyone, however, a living tiddly grey creature got out, not even a mouse, probably, but a little mouse that stayed for an unknown period behind the lining somewhere at the very bottom of this cloak, got out, and trembled. It's like looking at the face of the person in front of you with a heart. He didn't know how, didn't know anything, and made a meaningful movement that he could put into his mind just in case to take care of himself, but it looked like he was grieving and washing himself with tears, and then consoled himself and darted to freedom under a stinking carriage. Will this night ever end? Grumbled the soldier, chilled in the guard. This morning is like that. And the day will be like the morning. Another blind man's blind man, I suppose, to go, also to us. And these are lying, dragging. Well, bitches, listen, let's arrange a bathhouse for you. You will wash yourself with blood later, you will find out. Another guard of the same kind took his soul away. But apparently it didn't get better. He ran up from 3 or 4 paces and kicked the man who was lying down with his boot, alive to alive. He opened his eyes and thought that his life was over. Consciousness was struck by beatings, after which the body did not obey its own pain. He was lying on his side, probably where the rib had been broken, but, waking up from the pain, he still could not move and even roll over onto his back, to make himself feel better. There, at the carriage, fate spared him, the blows went to the one who got caught first. Then the convoy straightened up, and they seemed to be led into the future. A small non-Russian beggar woman in a soldier's pea jacket dragged silently behind the convoy. What she wanted, they did not understand. When it became necessary to get rid of her other people's little eyes, they drove her away. And in one remote place, a senior officer suddenly gave the command to stop. Again, they beat their own soldiers. Everyone strove to strike, got excited, drummed with their fists at random. He endured, he was humble. Rage brought on another when he hit the escort in response. He only managed to wave his fist once. They immediately knocked me down, took me in a ring, mixed with mud, not that there was no living place left, but at least a clean speck. The officer was smoking separately on the sidelines, waiting, a simple and seemingly honest face was calm. Not otherwise forgiven, he stood on one side with the officer and wept, looking at how the other was tormented. The officer was speechless, this one won't cry. To go into reconnaissance like that would become a hero. He finished his cigarette and barked, well, the eagles have fled, that's enough from him. They threw the crouched body on the ground, retreated, and they told him to pick it up and drag it. Hans happily clung to the burden in order to master it, the other one was already clinging to it, as if for life, but with muffled curses and pain, uttering either a groan or an obscene roar. The path, fastened by such a different spasm of 2 people, was not long. The convoy handed over the arrested to the guard, and they turned into prisoners. It seemed that all the cells were empty. Such was the silence here. It quietly replenished with newcomers, each one by one. They searched before entering the cell. They told me to hand over my overcoat with a belt. He sympathetically fulfilled everything, with the idea that he was renting out outerwear, as it happens at a party. The host smiled warmly. He remained in a scanty afterlife tunic. Warmed by cordiality, he asked with a smart, understanding look, do you need to take off your shoes? They also answered seriously, we have it at will, whoever wants it. And he voluntarily took off his shoes. Hiding their eyes and barely restraining themselves from laughter, a pair of lacquered orchestra boots was quickly tied up. There was nothing more to be greedy about. The camera was opened. They let her in like a little barefoot, without saying what would happen. The door hid in the back, it was like a shot. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, made of identical bare concrete slabs, were whitewashed. He stood and did not know where to step. His eyes were looking for some kind of warmth. What was extracted by the body instantly went into the air, so piercingly cold that it was painful to breathe. A wolf window held under the ceiling. Through the hole, covered with a web of grating, the poor light brought from the sky filtered. The gaze turned to the light. The narrow, oblong chamber was deeper than the grave. He trembled, fading away with strength so painfully, as if he were smouldering, and looked with surprise at the light, as close as it was far, from which there was no help, even warmth. Here, too, there was a court. They beat from time to time who stood guard. The guards changed every 2 hours. They entered the cell kindly. Everyone smiled. Were tipsy. In order not to injure the hand, they wrapped the fist with a belt. When he learned that they beat with their fists while standing on their feet, and if they fell, they would go with their boots, then they fell under the boots. So it all ended faster. Once he cried out, already half memory from the beatings, "But where am I?" Heard, where? In Karaganda. And, not remembering himself, he pleaded, "What have I done to you bad?" They just laughed in response. They knew about the newcomers that they were taken for murder. Until they were handed over as convicts to a stage, they were tortured here with a sense of duty. They tormented him all the time, to which he lost count, not realizing that it was one day or many days and nights. The soul was either looking for a way to salvation, or it was already making some kind of last circle and parting. He saw everything that happened in different years, but as it did not happen, good and bad, the faces of relatives and everything that he did secretly from them, over time, were combined into separate cues, each in his own. From one was only the realization of his guilt, which becomes insensible towards the end. From another string, a long and equally paralyzing feeling of joy at the end. As if something forced him to give an account of his past, but also accounted for him for the past period. This is what he suddenly realized with a fright, that everything flickers and does not repeat itself anymore. The soul desperately clung to the chaotic pictures and sensations from a past life, when he remembered himself simply free, which made him cry not from fear or pain, but from envy of who he was, as if it could be another person, who gave his life an even face. He will live instead of him, breathe, drink. He will enter as a son into the house of his father and mother, and they will love him until their death. And he began to mutter, as he used to in childhood, unable to be dumb anymore, feeling only a concrete ice slab under him, "I won't do this again. Forgive me. Forgive me, please. I will be the best." He fell from exhaustion into what something black, but as soon as he woke up, he mumbled again, not believing that no one else would ever forgive him. "Well, you still don't understand." There was another shout, "They told you, bitch, to go out. You'll make a fool later," in the investigator's office. The guard stood strangely at the threshold and did not enter the cell. He closed his eyes, then opened them. The guard hadn't moved. A little further on were boots. It was a pair of soldiers, some worn out, which was thrown in to replace those that had disappeared. "Hello, son, sit down," said a woman in a poor neat uniform. She sat at an iron table driven into the floor, continuing to write diligently, and after a long time did not pay attention to him. She was in her 40s. A pleasant, flabby fullness gently rounded the face. The hair was simply gathered in a hairpin. Eyes jealously followed the letters that came out from under the hand, and then wandered, as if guilty of something, until the white sheet was torn off. Writing was not easy for the mistress of the office, but she liked in the end to force these letters to obey herself and line up. When she pressed hard on the writing pen, her face also throbbed with tension, becoming seemingly focused and cruel. Not otherwise to help the one brought in for interrogation to pass the time in his office, which looked like a cell, but was noticeably filled with a female piece. Warmly, in silence, the hostess muttered with severity befitting a question, "Tell me how you got to such a life that you got into the same company with Nazikin. Who stabbed the head of the medical unit? Whose idea was it? Who had the sharpening?" Not hearing the answer, she sighed, "Well, shut up, shut up. But I still know." My head ached at every word I heard. He was silent, because he did not remember a person with such a surname in his life. The hostess seemed to be dictating to herself, without taking her eyes off the table. The fingerprints found on the sharpening completely coincide with Nazikin's fingerprints. The patrol's testimonies state that Nazikin delivered the sharpening blow. Being in a state of strong alcoholic intoxication, Nazikin grabbed a sharpener, inflicted one blow to the victim in the region of the heart, which became fatal. "Well, where did you look? What have you been doing? You refused to carry out the orders of your commander together. You left without permission together. You drank alcohol together on that fateful night. The patrol claims that you and Nazikin resisted arrest together, as a couple. And so the evil happened. Evil must be punished." It seemed that she put an end to it, and freed herself. She pushed the protocol aside. Somehow clumsily she took out from under the table a bottle of yogurt and a homemade roll wrapped in a clean white rag with raisin flecks. The tormented and robbed appearance of the prisoner, that he himself could pass for the victim of some crime, did not bother her at all. I began to somehow concentrate without mood to chew. It's the same as serving another hard job. She chewed a piece, washed it down with kefir from a bottle, stained her lips with white nourishing milk slurry, and suddenly brightened up, was surprised, clearly said, "Eat, eat," but then she frowned, wiped her lips with a rag, bit a bun, asked indifferently, "Maybe you want?" "Well, shut up, shut up." "Hey, in the guardroom, guys. Who is there?" "Turgic, dear, come to me." A guard appeared in the office, who brought him in for questioning. The hostess was busily muttering with her mouth full, "Now Nazikin Anatoly is here for me, so we will meet again. And wash this one, shave it, feed it, what better things you have there, what things were, give it out and clean it, well, in general, return it to its divine form. Then bring it here too, you will call me right into the corridor." "I obey, Svetlana Ivanovna." Admiring her, the guard responded vividly. "Well, that's good, she answered already into the void. She sat alone with peace in her empty office and chewed a bun in which there were so few raisins that sweetness in the mouth had to be expected for a very long time, like the fulfillment of desires. "Eat, eat and don't listen to anyone," she said to someone who was not here, if not to herself, suddenly looking like an old woman. "What better things you have there, what things were, to give out and clean, well, in general, return to a divine form. Then bring it here too, you will call me right into the corridor." "I obey, Svetlana Ivanovna." Admiring her, the guard responded vividly. "Well, that's good, she answered already into the void. She sat alone with peace in her empty office and chewed a bun in which there were so few raisins that sweetness in the mouth had to be expected for a very long time, like the fulfillment of desires. "Eat, eat and don't listen to anyone," she said to someone who was not here, if not to herself, suddenly looking like an old woman. "What better things you have there, what things were, to give out and clean, well, in general, return to a divine form. Then bring it here too, you will call me right into the corridor." "I obey, Svetlana Ivanovna." Admiring her, the guard responded vividly. "Well, that's good, she answered already into the void. She sat alone with peace in her empty office and chewed a bun in which there were so few raisins that sweetness in the mouth had to be expected for a very long time, like the fulfillment of desires. "Eat, eat and don't listen to anyone," she said to someone who was not here, if not to herself, suddenly looking like an old woman. She sat alone with peace in her empty office and chewed a bun in which there were so few raisins that sweetness in the mouth had to be expected for a very long time, like the fulfillment of desires. "Eat, eat and don't listen to anyone," she said to someone who was not here, if not to herself, suddenly looking like an old woman. She sat alone with peace in her empty office and chewed a bun in which there were so few raisins that sweetness in the mouth had to be expected for a very long time, like the fulfillment of desires. "Eat, eat and don't listen to anyone," she said to someone who was not here, if not to herself, suddenly looking like an old woman. When she had satiated her womb with what she had, she got up from the table, she carefully removed her swollen belly from under it and rose, lifting the weight. She stretched her arms to the sides, so that from under the unbuttoned uniform, this whole life-giving ball of flesh and blood bulged out. She yawned. In the junction she reached the wall where the sky was visible through the muzzle of the lattice. Looking longingly at the dim heavenly light, she stroked her stomach several times. She sighed patiently as she thought about her deadline. She brought her stomach to the workplace, already thinking about the murder case, where she still had to get a confession from the one who committed it. And closed in 4 prison walls, the guard, who had seen a lot, took the prisoner for the first time right after the interrogation to take a shower. Thinking about it was somehow painful. Giving your razor, and even more so shaving someone who was beaten and robbed, is so disgusting that the hands did not obey. But half an hour later, this newborn, with shiny wet hair, slicked into a straight part, and a smooth, already dried face, sat in the guardroom, as if his own, and waited for them to feed him. Suddenly, he saw a convoy of 2 soldiers pushing a handcuffed man forward along the corridor. He leaned back and cursed greedily, looking over his shoulder to see their faces. His gaze must have pierced. The security was uncomfortable. They could not strike backhand or stun with a shout and pacify even the 2 of them. Silently they worked, sweated and puffed. They shoved with pokes, but seemed to push back, and he, it seemed, was pushing. Everything was in him, both a fierce sense of his own strength, and a thirst for power over these people, which at that moment could only be quenched with their own blood. There was no hope of breaking free. She struck him like lightning and screamed in her throat when, beside herself with happiness, she shouted at the sight of the little man sitting in anticipation, Alyosha. It seemed to him that this little man rushed from the far end of the corridor to help, and therefore he also rushed, not towards, but to ram the body twisted in handcuffs, numb from the suddenness of what was happening guards. But as soon as those realize what happened and come to their senses from the cry, "They didn't let me breathe." From two sides they picked it up as if on a rack and dragged it. But even suspended, half alive, when dragged, he seemed to be fighting, angrily butting his forehead into emptiness. He couldn't comprehend that this happened only to him. And, writhing on this rack, he shouted, "Leshka, just be patient. There will be our time. Give it time. We will go out. We will make them," he groaned, and immediately commanded himself with all his might, "Death for death." The guard returned out of breath, sullen, led to the hosblock. For some reason, he barked, "What is your last name?" The answer was moaning, belated, Klurov. He suddenly muttered in the same dull voice, "But you, I think, are a snitch. Did you sell your friend?" When he put a bowl of porridge from a soldier's cauldron, he shoved, "Here, eat." But the one who, according to his understanding, betrayed porridge for a bowl, for some reason did not touch the food. "Eat," I said. "No way. Does it go down your throat? I would have rammed it for you." "Okay, we'll ram it in the cell." Everyone free from the shift came to look at the informer. "We have already corrected his bite a little. Here is Judas. In vain washed and shaved, you do not live. You better hang yourself." It was impossible to force them to take food by force, to stain with porridge, so as not to disobey the hostess. But the guard remembered her order to make the prisoner look divine. Without thinking twice, they told him to take off his shoes, and they put him at the rusty trough of the wash basin to wash his boots. Without a brush or even a rag, it was like washing. It could be forced to do this by shoving in the side, where the wound was reopened, in which pain was already nesting. Boots shone, but he was shoved, "Come on, even cleaner, Judas." And when it became the case for the overcoat, which was ordered to be issued, they forced them to pluck the adhering dirt from it with their hands, and then the specks. It's been about an hour, if not more. The prisoner still had to be returned for interrogation. At the door of the office, the guard involuntarily hesitated. An angry female cry was heard from the investigation room. "Oh, she can't. Svetlana Ivanovna Svetikova is a man. And you, scum different, excite her. All. This also does not live. Got it? We'll rid the land of you at night." The guard knocked and opened the door without waiting for a call. It burst out, "Sign, damn it, the protocol, or you will chew it." The woman's twisted face was visible through the crack. Raised with anger from her chair, she carried a scribbled piece of paper with a saber over the head of a man sitting opposite, on the other side of the table. Only his back was visible, but bent and somehow aloof, as if part of an already decapitated body, planted for some reason on a chair. The hostess suspended the interrogation and left the office. She looked at the prisoner and, pleased with his appearance, released the guard. She said, firm and powerful, "Follow me." The doors swung open one by one. There was more and more light and air. "Lean on you. I'm still in the position of a woman. One is something hard. Hurry. It's your luck that the case came to me, since Nazykin distinguished himself again. Say thank you, there was someone to bother for you. I noticed this a long time ago. Whoever does not spare the last and clings to his teeth will save his own. And who mumbles and complains in vain, he will only beat the thresholds. His dear and beloved will disappear." She stopped, panted. "Probably at the last door." She took out his military ID from his tunic pocket. She returned it and said, "If there was money in it, do not charge." "Well, demobilization, you're going home. You haven't seen anything and you don't know anyone. In this city you are not yesterday, not today, did you understand?" Suddenly, abruptly, offhand, barked, "Or do you want to go back?" He smiled and was silent guiltily, not realizing that the hostess would only be pleased. "Oh, what is this? Were they gold teeth?" She caught herself, she bustled. For some reason, he happily shook his head in denial. "Well, don't demand anything, son, you will live, but what about teeth? You can insert whatever you like in the wild, even if made of gold." He did not realize that he was being released. When this happened, he was frightened. They opened the iron door and immediately found himself on a clean, deserted street, and there was nowhere to go. His legs buckled slightly, which he did not feel, and in his head the voice of the hostess sounded achingly, already addressed to the one who received it from hand to hand right outside the gates of this building, outside of red, like blood, brick. The owner of his life was deaf and, it seemed, refused to believe that he saw in front of him the one whom he fondly remembered all this time as a son, although he no longer wanted to see each other since when he mentally escorted him to his native land with an eternal tooth. Home. Why did you do that? Asked heartbroken eyes. He stood and understood that it was Abdullah Ibrahimovic, but he could not say anything. Silent. The deaf man glared and painfully waited for an answer, only a movement of his lips. He shouted, as if in fear that he could no longer hear, "What did you say? What are you talking about?" And he saw a smile that revealed some kind of black wounds instead of teeth, from which he recoiled in silence. Abdullah walked and did not look back. He timidly set off after him and dragged himself, probably, for forgiveness, but all the way, as if on purpose, he lagged behind. As they were walking, it became dusk on the streets. Everything unfamiliar and alien for a long time saw off through the city, until a railway station arose in the cold and emptiness. The waiting room was full of people, full of light. Behind the black mirrors of the windows, which looked directly at the platform, a distant noise was heard. Women, men, children who were looking for salvation here, in search of a place, pushed under the echoing high arch, where it was clear and empty. Or, having found it, some clung to the baggage of blunt, prim suitcases, for some reason all black and brown, some to the belongings with which the bales were torn, or simply to each other, so as not to lose. At the window of the military cash desk, it became free to breathe. On this island of order and some other law than in the general queues, on demand, a passenger seat was given to the train departing at midnight. A patrol stood idle near the military cash desk, an officer on duty and two boys in cadet shoulder straps, smelling of cologne. The officer looked at it and grew gloomy, a freshly baked passenger, in ugly boots, who also had something ugly sticking out from under the collar of his overcoat, and his face was obviously beaten, inspired such disgust that it was too late to ask him to show documents. This stuffed animal itself was under arrest. Abdullah shuddered at the look on duty, and backed away, covering himself. The patrol now surrounded them both. The deaf man pulled the officer aside and said in a whisper, "You must not touch, please." Commissioned it, strongly on the head sick. Train coming soon. He goes home sick. The face of the officer on duty, which was concentrated and gloomy, suddenly went limp and stupid. He believed and nodded knowingly, looking around already with a desire to be away from the stuffed soldier. The patrol retreated. Abdullah had nothing else to do in this city. Having the appearance of the one who remains, he, as if loving, who had no one else to love, spent only his own hour of life at the station. His face was impregnable and alien. This time they were nearby in the waiting room because the boss was waiting in the heat for his train. Suddenly, the deaf man whined under his breath, not realizing that it was heard, "I wanted good for you. I did good for you all the same stone-faced," suddenly fell silent. And when he looked for the last time, he said with a threat in his voice, "Don't follow me. I don't know you anymore." He was left alone, and the one who so simply and cruelly gave his saved life left to disappear forever. Together with the ticket, there was money in his pocket, 10 rubles, a red bill, which was the same last one, but only a victim of Abdullah, like his last fierce look and last words. The homeless and feral-looking soldier, who smiled like a monkey at everyone he met, soon managed to become familiar at the station, as if he was looking for something or someone, but did not find it. Several times he appeared in the buffet, looking around the same counter that looked like a gnawed bone. In the buffet by the night there was only a drink called tea. The boy asked for a glass of this tea for himself and handed out 10 rubles in payment for the penny liquid. Hungry drank it and left. When he appeared again, he asked firmly for a glass of tea. The drink was a little warm, but he sloshed for a long time, standing aside, as if it were boiling water. Something similar happened in the waiting room, where he occupied in turn all the seats that suddenly became vacant, but then gladly gave them up to women with children, then to the elderly. And on the platform, where he walked from end to end with a very important look, drawing attention to himself by meeting and seeing off each new train, asking which and when it arrives or leaves, and then also informing everyone who gaped or was in a hurry to find out about it. Passing by the patrol, he tried to salute the officer on duty as impressively as possible and, it seemed, deliberately climbed into his eyes. Suddenly he came up and asked permission to go out of need, as if leaving the post. The officer on duty was at a loss, but nevertheless he personally gave him permission to do this with fearful reciprocal seriousness and even sent one of the cadets to show the way to the toilet. Again, he turned to the duty officer for permission to take a walk on the square near the station, and somehow immediately got tired of it. The officer waved him off and grunted to go where he wanted. He returned to the waiting room with a huge head of a watermelon in his arms, which the Kazakhs, looking at night, bargained so well, whose wind-worn wandering shops, like tents, were waiting for someone on the station square even at this hour. Hugging an overweight old watermelon that he had accidentally bought, but apparently not for himself, he again appeared to the boss and reported that he had bought a watermelon. The cadets looked at each other with a smirk. The officer was ashamed, frowned, hissed, driving away from the patrol. He thought he should share the watermelon and readily said so, after which the boss simply barked to get out. Realizing that he is being driven away, he pressed the gift that had so angered these people to himself and hastily asked just one question to find out what time it was. The person on duty was frozen with fear, but also darkened ominously. Fortunately for him, some citizen, bored near the patrol, hearing this question, looked at the chimes that hung in the waiting room above everyone's head and immediately responded casually, saying what time it was. Knowing how much was left to wait for the train, he wandered to the platform. It was cold to stand still, and for some reason walking with a watermelon was just as painful as it was hard. He would not dare to get rid of him, because he spent money, which even now he considered not his own, but his, Abdullah Ibrahimovic. Feeling stupid and unhappy, he suddenly thought of a girl who once begged before his eyes because she was hungry. He could not remember what she was like, he only seemed to feel her hunger, and at first slowly, and then more and more confidently, he walked in the direction where the trains that were strange to him were leaving. Everything covered the rails like waves, shining with steel crests in the moonlight, and even seemed to emit a heavy rumble similar to their breathing. Gravel teeth gnashed dully underfoot. The coldness of the steel river was revived by the multicolored lights of the semaphores. The wind brought either the airy freshness of the cold and a drizzle felt to the point of chills, or the smoke from the sleepers and a pinch of something burnt, probably coal from the stoves of the passing cars. He clearly saw the night when they were walking at the same hour in the same direction and along the same silent expanse, and realized with surprise that everything had already happened, only there was not this heavy watermelon that he carried for the girl, for some reason remembering her, and not about those who also once were. Thank you for downloading the book in the free electronic library royallib.ru, http://royallib.ru. Leave a review about the book, http://royallib.ru/comment/Pavlov_Oleg/Karagandinsky_deviatiny.html. All books by the author, http://royallib.ru/author/Pavlov_Oleg.html.